Hey guys, what is up? I hope everyone's having a great day. So as you can see, today we're taking a look at the first transcript of Christian Carino. So this is going to be another long one, so let's just get right to it. Okay, so this was done January 19th, 2021. Who do we got? We have, on behalf of Depp, we have Mr. Preziato. I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. Camille, Stephanie, Callan, Ben Chu, and then the only person on behalf of Amber is Elaine. Elaine is all alone. And Mr. Darren on behalf of Christian Carino. Also present, of course she is, Amber Heard. She just could not keep her nose out of anything, could she? Okay, so those are all the exhibits that they got going into. They're just introducing themselves. We don't need to do that. Okay, Carino has been sworn in. Okay, so Elaine starts this off. Would you please state your name and address for the record, and you may use your business address if you feel more comfortable. So he just said, Christian Carino, the work address is blah, blah, blah. Do you have a zip code, date of birth? All right. And what is your current occupation? Christian, I'm a talent agent. Elaine, and could you give me just a very brief description of your educational background and work experience? Christian, sure. I have a BA from the University of Massachusetts, and my work background is I've been at CAA for approximately 16 years. Before that, I had a 12-year run with 2 different advertising agencies in New York. Elaine, and who were those advertising agencies in New York? Christian, how did he say that? Ogilvy and Mather and McCann Erickson. Elaine, have you ever had your deposition taken before, Mr. Carino? He said yes. Elaine, excuse me? Christian, yes, I have. Elaine, on how many occasions? Christian, I believe 2. Elaine, and without getting into getting too detailed, what were the circumstances? Were they work-related, personal? Christian, work-related. Elaine, okay, and how recently were those 2 depositions? Christian, many years ago. Elaine, are we talking more than 10? Christian, less than 10. Elaine, and were you? I'm going to ask a little bit more about the circumstances. And again, I don't want to get too personal, and I don't want what was the nature, if you can tell me. Christian, the last one was a lawsuit that emanated from a company using the intellectual property of a client without a contract. Elaine, all right. And what was the other one? Christian, I don't actually remember what the other one is. Elaine, have you ever provided the Mr. Preziato, and I'll object to the relevance if in any event. Elaine, have you ever provided a deposition on behalf of or relating to Mr. Depp? Christian, no. Elaine, okay, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, and at any time you do not understand my question, let me know that. If I ask a question and you answer, I'm going to assume you understand my question, okay? Christian, yep. Elaine, okay. And then my next part is that please try to. And so Christian says, Elaine, just one thing. I have construction going on at my house, so I'm just going to go back and forth between mute. So I just want to explain why I'm doing that. So just to keep the noise as much away from you guys as I can, okay? Elaine, okay, I appreciate that. The next thing I'm going to ask you is when you respond to questions that are affirmative or negative, yes or no, please actually enunciate those, because we have a court reporter that's taking this down, and a nod of the head or a shake of the head doesn't help him take that down, okay? Christian, I understand, yes. Elaine, and then this might be not too difficult since you're going to be muted, but I would ask that you wait until I have finished asking questions before you start answering it. Again, for the court reporter's benefit, so that the court reporter is able to get both of us down and not try to be capturing us interrupting each other. Christian, sure. Elaine, great. Now you indicated that you were a talent agent. Can you please describe what that means? Christian, I represent multiple clients and brands and transactions in the entertainment space. Elaine, and when you say the entertainment space, what are you including? Christian, the different genres of entertainment, everything from motion picture to television to books to licensing to modeling, all the different areas that the agency it operates in. Elaine, and when you say represents brands, what do you mean by this? Fuck, Elaine. Christian, I represent a few brands that contract us to provide consulting services to them in the entertainment space. Elaine, can you give me an example? Christian, I represent Audible and help bring them ideas for their platform. Elaine, with respect to representing multiple clients, what do you actually physically do for these clients? Mr. Darren, objection is vague and ambiguous. Christian, Elaine, I'll rephrase that. I'm trying to understand Mr. Carino, and I'm trying to have a reflection here of precisely in layperson's terms what it is you do on a day-to-day basis. So with that backdrop, I'm going to ask you a clean question again. As a talent agent representing multiple clients, what types of services do you perform for them, and what is the objective? Mr. Preziato, objection, compound. Mr. Darren, you can answer if you understand the question and you're capable of giving an answer to that kind of generic question. Mr. Preziato, just to clarify, Mr. Carino, I'll be making objections just for the record. It doesn't mean that you're not required to answer unless your counsel instructs you not to. Christian, okay, yes, I conduct business transactions on behalf of clients and brands in the entertainment space. Elaine, and what does that mean? Christian, it means I organize, pitch, transact in contractual agreements between talent and studios, talent and brands, entertainment platforms, and individuals, brands and individuals. Elaine, I'm sorry, have you finished? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay. So when an actor comes to you and you're representing the actor, what are the types of things that you do to help find work for that actor? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts, not an evidence. Elaine, well, do you represent any actors? Christian, I do work with every different group of talent within the agency, and for each person is different. The business that I personally oversee for them. So in some cases, I am negotiating contractual agreements for a music artist to go to Las Vegas. In some cases, I'm transactioning an agreement for an artist to have a relationship with a brand. In some cases, it's an artist with a platform like Netflix. It spans the general platform capabilities that the agency has overall. Elaine, is one of the objectives of your representation to build the careers of the individuals you represent? Christian, yes. Elaine, and what is it you look for? And I'm going to say with acting, because I think that's a little bit easier here and more on point. What are the objectives? I'm going to strike that and rephrase that. Thank you, Elaine. What do you do for actors to help them build their careers? Mr. Preziato, objection, overbroad. Christian, I think that's too vague to answer. Elaine, all right, well, let me try a little differently then. How do you measure success in the actors you represent? Christian, it depends who it is I'm working with and what the nature of my responsibility is with them. And for each person that I work with, the representation scope is different. Elaine, can you give me some examples? Christian, of what? Elaine, of differences in how you measure the levels of success with the people you represent. And I'm talking actors. Christian, that's too vague to answer too. You'd have to be more specific. Elaine, all right. Then do you want to just list a few of the names of the actors you represent and we can just go through each of them? Christian, sure. Mr. Darren, well, I'm going to ask you not to talk about specific clients for privacy reasons with regard to what their objectives are and their careers. So, Christian, so what is it that I can answer, Greg? Mr. Darren, well, I don't want you to invade the privacy of specific clients. If they've given you objectives with regard to their careers, I think that that's their private information, so I'll object to the extent. Christian, Elaine, Mr. Darren, you can't ask for their private information. Christian, let me try to answer it in a different way. So the way agencies work, or at least the way our agency works, is we work in teams. So each client has a pretty significant group of people that represent them in whole. No one person represents anyone that we represent on their own. And in each case, everyone has a different role. So in every instance, my scope of what I do for that individual client is different. Elaine, and when you say you work with a team, who else? Who are the other components of the team? Christian, there are representatives from many different departments within the agency that are specialists in specific areas of representation that make up a client's team. Elaine, let's keep it with actors and unless I ask you differently, let's assume I'm asking about actors so we can just stay, Christian, so an actor might have a motion picture agent, a television agent, a literary agent, a commercial endorsement agent, a licensing agent, and a voiceover agent. Elaine, okay, and then you work with all of them for the different parts and pieces? Christian, yes. But again, everyone has a different role on every team. So, and there's usually a point person who's the person that has signed that client that's responsible for building the team, coordinating the team, and running the team, and ultimately responsible for the agency delivering. So your question about defining success for representation usually falls to the person who assigned the individual talent. Elaine, okay, other than speaking with your counsel, and I don't want to know about your speaking with your counsel, have you done anything else to prepare for this deposition today? Christian, nope. Elaine, have you spoken with anyone on behalf of Mr. Depp? Christian, I let Adam Waldman know that my deposition was upcoming. Elaine, and when did you speak with Adam Waldman? Christian, a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago, somewhere around there. Elaine, and how did you communicate with Adam Waldman? Christian, by phone. Elaine, okay, how long have you known Adam Waldman? Christian, probably for the duration of the time that he has worked with Johnny Depp. I don't know. Elaine, do you? Christian, what the time frame is. And then Elaine's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Christian, I don't know what the time frame is, but I probably first met him when Johnny started to work with him. Elaine, what is your understanding of Adam Waldman's relationship with Johnny Depp? Christian, I believe it's his lead attorney. Elaine, and with the respect to all of the different aspects of Johnny Depp's ownership and interest in things? Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for speculation. Elaine, yeah, that was a terrible question. Let me try that again. When you say lead attorney with respect to what? Christian, to his legal affairs outside of the business transactional work in his entertainment community? Elaine, and do you know how Mr. Depp met Mr. Waldman? Christian, I do not. Elaine, and you already indicated that you can't recall exactly when that relationship started. Do you have an estimate of how many years Mr. Waldman had been working with Mr. Depp? Christian, several years. Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for speculation. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't get your answer, I'm sorry. Christian, several years, I don't know how long it's been. Elaine, okay, and do you recall the first time you met Adam Waldman? Christian, no. Elaine, how frequently have you had contact with Adam Waldman over the last several years while he's been representing Mr. Depp as his lead attorney? Christian, infrequently, probably once every few months, maybe sometimes longer periods of that time in between conversations. Elaine, and ordinarily, what types of things have you spoken with Mr. Waldman about when you have spoken with him every few months? Mr. Preziato, objection, overbroad, vague, and ambiguous. Christian, I would say most of my conversation with Adam has been about health and well-being of Johnny Depp. Elaine, let me take you back to the last time you spoke with Mr. Waldman. Other than before, when you told him that you were going to be deposed shortly, do you recall that conversation, specifically what you discussed with Adam Waldman? Christian, yes. Elaine, and do you recall approximately when that was? Christian, it was after the verdict in the UK. Elaine, and what do you recall of your conversation with Mr. Waldman after the verdict in the UK? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent, calls for hearsay. Mr. Darren, you can go ahead and answer. Christian, I asked him how Johnny was. Elaine, and what did Mr. Waldman say? Christian, I think at the time he said, Mr. Preziato, objection, hearsay. Christian, he said he hadn't spoken to him. Elaine, and when you had that conversation about 10 days ago with Mr. Waldman and you told him you were being deposed, did you have any other discussion with him other than the fact that you were being deposed? In other words, did you just call him to say you were being deposed in 10 days and hang up, or was there more to that discussion? Oh my God, Elaine. Yeah, all of us just say, as soon as the person picks up, we're like, hey, guess what? This is happening. And then we immediately hang up. That's the conversation. Elaine, get your head out of your ass. Okay. Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it calls for hearsay. Christian, there wasn't much more to the conversation. I just wanted to make sure he was aware that I was being deposed. Elaine, okay. And why was it important to you that Mr. Waldman knew you were being deposed? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts, not an evidence. I don't think he said it was important to him. Elaine, I'll rephrase that. Why did you want to tell Mr. Waldman that you were being deposed? Christian, I wanted to make sure that he was aware that my deposition was actually happening because it had been in conversation for a long time. Elaine, okay. And what do you recall Mr. Waldman saying on that occasion? Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for hearsay. Christian, there was no specific response in that. Just thank me for letting him know. Elaine, did Mr. Waldman indicate whether he already knew you were being deposed? Christian, I don't remember. Mr. Preziato, same objection. Elaine, okay, I'm going to take you back a little bit. So between the UK verdict came out on November 2nd, and between that time and this 10 days ago, did you have any other conversations with Adam Waldman? Christian, I don't remember. Elaine, have you had any conversations with Adam Waldman about Amber Heard? Christian, over the course of the time I've known him? Yeah. Elaine, what do you recall? Christian, well, everything. Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent calls for hearsay. Christian, everything we talk about has a connection to Amber because it's all related to, actually not everything, because some of the other lawsuits didn't involve Amber, but to the extent that there was conversations about one of the suits that related to Johnny and Amber, they all did. They all involved her indirectly. Elaine, which of the suits related to Mr. Depp and Amber Heard? Christian, I don't understand your question. And Elaine, neither do I. Elaine, I think you indicated that some of the other lawsuits did not relate to Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard, and that several of them did, so you would have conversations with Mr. Waldman in connection with those suits. So my question is, which of the suits involved Amber and Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent that is lacks foundation. Objection, lacks foundation. Christian, the UK suit and this suit. Elaine, did any other lawsuits involve Johnny Depp and Amber Heard? Christian, the other main lawsuit that I'm familiar with are not related to Amber. Elaine, in connection with the UK suit, what do you recall Adam Waldman discussing with you? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it calls for hearsay. So Elaine repeats that. She said, in connection with the UK lawsuit, and just so we're clear that we're on the same page, the UK lawsuit we're referring to is the one in which Mr. Depp sued the Sun and Dan Wooten. Is that correct? Christian, correct. Elaine, okay, so what do you recall of your discussion with Adam Waldman relating to the UK suit? Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for hearsay, also potentially attorney-client privilege. At the time of that conversation, Mr. Carino, you were acting as an agent of Mr. Depp. Christian, my conversation with Adam were mostly, if not wholly, focused on Johnny Depp's personal well-being and not related to specifics about the lawsuit or work or anything else. Mr. Darren, well, I think that, Mr. Preziato, I might. Okay, so Mr. Darren said, I think the question is were you Mr. Depp's agent at the time? Is that the question? Mr. Preziato, yes, at the time of the conversation with Mr. Waldman, that was asked about. Christian, which conversation? Mr. Preziato, this last one, the one regarding the Sun matter or just after the Sun matter. Christian, I don't know if I was representing him at that time or not. Elaine, and then Mr. Preziato kicks up, do you presently represent him? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to establish if there's concern for attorney-client privilege there. To the extent that you represented Mr. Depp and were in conversation with Mr. Waldman, I would assert the attorney-client privilege since you were the agent of Mr. Depp at that time and Mr. Waldman was his attorney. So I will assert that. And Elaine, you can ask questions, but there's no waiver of any privilege. Elaine, Leo, you and I will agree to disagree that Mr. Carino's talent agency relationship with Mr. Depp somehow imposes an attorney-client privilege. I believe the law is quite clear that it does not, but let's get through the questions and we'll see whether there's any difficulties at all in that. Mr. Darren, well, excuse me, 1 second. Ms. Bredehoff, I need to understand whether you're at any given point counsel in asserting an attorney-client privilege. And with regard to any of these given conversations, you need to make a decision if you're asserting that attorney-client privilege and instructing the witness not to answer based on that attorney-client privilege, because the privilege is Mr. Depp's, not the witness's. And whether I agree with it or not, whether Ms. Bredehoff agrees with it or not, it's not the witness's to waive. So if you decide to assert it and defend it, we're obligated to honor it because it is, as I say, Mr. Depp's. So you need to make that decision with regard to any point in time. And if you assert it, we're bound to honor it, right? So he said, so I'll defer to you and you can make the decision, right? You can let the witness answer it and reserve it. You can instruct the witness not to answer and we'll honor it. But that's your decision to make, not ours, right? Mr. Preziato, I understand that. Thank you. We'll do that on a question by question basis. Okay. So Elaine kicks back in. Mr. Carino, how many times did you speak with Mr. Waldman about Mr. Depp in relationship to the UK litigation? Christian, I don't know. Elaine, would you estimate it was more than 10? Christian, no. Elaine, more than 5? No. Elaine, so sometimes somewhere between 1 and 4? Christian, yes, likely. Elaine, okay. Do you recall approximately when you spoke with Mr. Waldman about the UK litigation? Christian, I don't. Elaine, do you have any recollection of speaking to Mr. Waldman at all about Mr. Depp in connection with the UK litigation during the actual UK trial? Christian, you mean while they were in court physically? Elaine, yeah. Christian, I don't believe I spoke to him during that time. Elaine, do you recall speaking with Mr. Waldman about Mr. Depp and the UK litigation at any time after the trial and before the decision came out? Christian, I believe I did. Elaine, and when do you recall speaking with him? Christian, I don't know when it was, but I believe we did have a conversation while they were awaiting the verdict. Elaine, okay, and what do you recall of that conversation? Mr. Preziato, objection, potentially attorney-client privilege. Mr. Carino, I'd request that you not divulge any communications between you and Mr. Waldman while Mr. Waldman was acting as Mr. Depp's attorneys in connection with the legal matter. And the legal matter here being the Sun litigation. If you can answer it without divulging such communications, go ahead. Regardless, we reserve the privilege, regardless of what the testimony is in response to this question. Mr. Darren, so is that an instruction not to answer? Mr. Preziato, right. To the extent it was a communication between Mr. Carino and Mr. Waldman and involved the specifics of the Sun trial. Otherwise, you can answer. Okay, and then they can't figure out the distinction. Mr. Preziato, I'm trying to give some leeway here. So to the extent that there's a discussion, legal matters, I would be concerned about the privilege. So to the extent there are discussions, those discussions involve legal matters with respect to the Sun case, then I would consider those privileged. Mr. Darren, is the distinction you're drawing, for example, Mr. Carino talked about Mr. Depp while being his distinct from legal matters? Mr. Preziato, correct. Mr. Darren, if it was about Mr. Depp's well-being, he can answer. But if it was about legal matters, you are instructing him not to answer? Mr. Preziato, yes. Thank you for that clarification, Greg. Mr. Darren, all right. Do you understand, Christian? Christian said no. Elaine, let me see if I can try to set this. I still object to the raising of an attorney-client privilege with respect to Mr. Carino at all in this context. But let me see if I can try to set these out so we can get these borders set. Mr. Carino, did you discuss with Mr. Waldman in this conversation you had after the trial and before the verdict came out anything respecting what Mr. Waldman thought might happen as a result? In other words, what he thought the verdict might be. Mr. Daring, hang on, Christian. Is this a legal matter, Mr. I can't even say his name. I'm trying not to laugh. Preziato. Elaine is so hell-bent. She's going to die on that hill with the UK trial. And she read the UK trial and thought, this is something I can hang on to. She read every word of that document, all of the documents, and said, it's in the bag for me. Mr. Preziato, it's hard to say the way the question is phrased, and I would object that the question is vague and ambiguous. Mr. Carino, what I'm trying to avoid here is divulging any information Mr. Waldman may have relayed it to you regarding specifics of the law case. In other words, strategy, witnesses they intend to call, if they intend to appeal the matter, anything that relates to the specifics of the legal aspects of this case. Christian, I think hearing all that, what I can say is my conversation with Adam, every single conversation has predominantly been about the state of Johnny's well-being. I had no interest and was not inquisitive about anything relating to the actual dynamics of the legal proceedings. Elaine, and are you not an attorney? You're not an attorney, correct? Christian, I am not an attorney. Elaine, and when you say that you're an agent of Mr. Depp, it's an agent as a talent agent, correct? Not a legal representative on behalf of Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, correct. Elaine, what did Mr. Waldman say about the state of Johnny Depp's well-being and the conversations you had between the trial and the decision coming up? Christian, I believe he said something like he was holding up pretty well. Elaine, do you recall having any discussion with Mr. Waldman about Amber Heard? Christian, nope. Elaine, during or after the UK trial? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you have a recollection of speaking with Mr. Waldman in relation to Amber Heard at any time from the point in which the UK lawsuit was filed up through to the present? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you have a recollection of speaking with Mr. Waldman about Amber Heard at any point from when the op-ed that she wrote and was published in the Washington Post and the present? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you have a recollection of speaking with Mr. Waldman about the impact of the UK litigation on Mr. Depp's career reputation? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you have a recollection of speaking with Mr. Waldman at any time about any of Mr. Depp's lawsuits or other conduct and the impact it may have had on his reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, this I would object to as attorney-client privilege. To the extent you are having, Mr. Carino, to the extent you are having discussions with Mr. Waldman with respect to the specifics of pending lawsuits, and more particularly any strategies or impressions that Mr. Waldman gave you about the case, I would ask you not to divulge that based on the attorney-client privilege. Otherwise, I'm okay with you answering the question. And so Christian's like, can you repeat the question? Mr. Darren, by ask, do you mean instruct? Then you're bound to honor that instruction, Mr. Carino. Elaine, again, I disagree with the objection, but let me try to phrase it so we can make the record clear. Did you have any discussion with Mr. Waldman about legal strategy of any of Depp's lawsuits? Christian, no. Elaine, did you have any discussion with Mr. Waldman about any legal advice being provided to Mr. Depp by Mr. Waldman? Christian, I'm not sure what that means. Elaine, did you have any discussions with Mr. Waldman about how he interpreted the impact of any legal actions on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, nope. Elaine, did you have any conversation with Mr. Waldman about how you believed or were concerned about legal actions having an impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, can you repeat that? Elaine, did you have any conversation with Mr. Waldman in which you expressed any thoughts or opinions on how you believed any litigation was having an effect on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, yes. Elaine, how many times? Christian, one that I can recall. Elaine, and when was that? Christian, I have no idea. Years ago. Elaine, what do you recall of that conversation? Christian, the conversation was that I expressed my opinion that the sooner the litigation was over, the better it was for Johnny's career and well-being. Elaine, and do you recall which litigation you were referring to? Christian, no, I don't think I was referring to any one litigation. I think there were multiple litigations happening at that time. Elaine, and why did you feel that way? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague, ambiguous. Christian, I don't know how to answer that, Elaine. Elaine, if you expressed to Mr. Waldman that the sooner the litigations was over, the better for Mr. Depp, what are you thinking when you said that? Why did you think that? Christian, I think anytime someone in litigation publicity, it is at a minimum a distraction to that person's career. And in a lot of cases, it negatively impacts that person because there's attention drawn to them that is outside of what people want to know about that person. Elaine, and what do you mean by it distracts from their career? Christian, I mean that with someone who's well known, people don't want to hear that they're in a lawsuit with anybody about anything. Elaine, why not? Christian, because that's just not what they want to know or hear about people. Elaine, and why do you believe that? Christian, based on my experience in this world for the past 16 years. Elaine, and when you say it's negatively impacts, what do you mean by that? Christian, people don't want to hear that the people that they look up to are in litigation. Elaine, do you also believe that impacts career decisions by producers, directors, companies, brands, things? Christian, yes. Elaine, of that nature? Christian, yes. Elaine, and in what way? Christian, because the general public doesn't want to hear that people they look up to are in litigation. And when the more oxygen it takes up in the overall news or coverage of an individual and the less focus it is on that person's career, the less interested studios, brands, in the general public becomes in that person. Elaine, and therefore lost opportunities. Christian, yes. Elaine, when you expressed to Adam Waldman that your opinion that the sooner the litigation was over for Mr. Depp, the better, what did Mr. Waldman say? Mr. Preziato, objection, hearsay. Christian, to be honest, I don't recall exactly what he said, but something like we're going to get this over with as fast as we can. Elaine, do you remember which litigations were ongoing at the time you had this discussion with Mr. Waldman? Christian, I do not. Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Elaine, I'm going to ask you. Axel, could you please bring up number 4, Carino number 4? Okay, now she's just trying to figure it out. Okay. Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what's been marked as Carino exhibit number 4. Lane's a mess. This is the lawsuit that was brought by Mr. Depp and Edward White against the Mandel Company. Do you recall that particular lawsuit? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay. And what is your understanding that this litigation was brought in connection with the Mandel Company, having served as the management company for Mr. Depp for a number of years, business reasons? Christian, yes. Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation, compound. Elaine, what is your understanding about the nature of this litigation? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, I really don't have much of an understanding of the specifics outside of the general accusation that his business managers acted in a way that was illegal in how they conducted his business. Elaine, and on what did you base that understanding? Christian, I don't know. I didn't. I was not involved in this. Elaine, do you have any communications with Mr. Depp about this lawsuit and Mr. Mandel? Christian, other than it being mentioned in passing? No. Elaine, do you recall whether the Mandel lawsuit was ongoing at the time you had a conversation with Mr. Waldman? Christian, I do not. Elaine, let me just finish my question, suggesting that the sooner the litigation was over, the better. Christian, I do not. Elaine, do you believe that the Mandel litigation distracted Mr. Depp's career and negatively impacted him? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Christian, I don't think I said it distracted his career. Mr. Prezziato, assumes facts not on evidence. Elaine, do you believe that the Mandel lawsuit posed a distraction for Mr. Depp's career? Christian, I don't know. Elaine, I'm going to ask you, take a look, and then we're bringing it to 4. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Carino Deposition Exhibit 5. And as you can see here, it's an article, June 21st, 2017, by the Hollywood Gossip, and it's titled Johnny Depp Caught Lying to Police About Amber Heard Abuse. Do you recall that coming up during the time frame, that issue? Christian, no. Mr. Prezziato, objection. Mr. Darren, hold on. Go ahead, Leo. So Leo goes on, Mr. Prezziato, objection, sure, thank you. Calls for speculation, assumes facts not on evidence, failure to authenticate a purported news report, and also as phrased, it's compound. And Mr. Darren, and I'll add vague and ambiguous. Mr. Prezziato, lacks foundation also. I'm so sorry, Greg. Mr. Darren, and I'll add vague and ambiguous. I think your question was, do you recall that coming up? I don't know what that in your question is. Elaine, that's fair, Greg. Let me rephrase it. Do you have a recollection, Mr. Carino, during the period around June 21st, 2017, in the Mandel lawsuit, an article being written that suggested that Mr. Depp was caught lying to the police about Miss Heard's abuse? To the police. Did Depp ever talk to the police? What? And Elaine's taking it from a gossip rag. Like, that's the thing, Elaine. God damn it. Fuck. Anyway, Christian, no. Elaine, okay, is the article like this where it's discussing not Mr. Depp's roles in his movies, but instead his personal life and personal allegations, the type of thing that you were referring to where it may negatively impact or be distraction that people don't want to hear these things about their movie actor? Mr. Prezziato, objection, assumes facts not on evidence, vague and ambiguous, and compound, also calls for speculation. Christian, I would say the way I would answer your question, Elaine, is the topic. Of course, this publication, this is not a publication that I've ever heard of or anyone in the industry pays attention to. Oh, snap. Elaine, I'm sorry. Had you finished your answer? Christian, yeah. Mr. Prezziato, Mr. Carino, just to be clear, you're referring to Exhibit 5, what's up on the screen now? Christian, I don't know if it's Exhibit 5, but it's the Hollywood Gossip article from Mr. Prezziato. Yes, it's up there on the screen. Thank you. Christian, yeah. Elaine, my question is maybe a little bit different, Mr. Carino. I'm asking whether you were referring to litigation being a distraction to careers and negatively impacting. Were you referring to the types of things like this where instead of talking about Mr. Depp's movie career and his roles, it's talking about his personal life and allegations of abuse of Amber Heard? Christian, nope. Mr. Prezziato, objection, misstates testimony, assumes facts not on evidence, and is compound. Elaine, I think you already answered. Elaine, Mr. Prezziato, yes. Elaine, what are you referring to then? Christian, litigation. Elaine, well, Alex, let me just take control for a moment, please. I'm just going to move this down just a touch. Would you agree that this is referring to the litigation? In fact, would you agree that this article is stemming from what refers to as, quote, an increasingly contentious lawsuit against the former management group TMG? Mr. Prezziato, objection, calls for speculation, lack of foundation, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, and vague and ambiguous, by this, I assume you're referring to the article itself, but the portions that you highlighted? Elaine, correct. Christian, what's the question? Elaine, yeah, Mr. Carino, what I'm asking here is when you said that litigation can be a distraction to the career, negatively impacts people because people don't want to read or hear about things that are not related to or to actors that they look up to. Is this not an example of that? And by this, I'm referring to Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, assumes facts not on evidence. Elaine, excuse me. And by this, I'm referring to Deposition Exhibit 5, an article that's discussing Mr. Depp's spending habits and allegations of abuse against Amber Heard that are stemming or resulting came of this litigation or related to this litigation. Mr. Preziato, again, as to the article itself, assumes facts not on evidence, lacks foundation, otherwise calls to speculation, and is compound. Christian, Elaine, I don't know how to answer your question. I'm sorry. Elaine, okay, let me try a different way. When you say that litigation can be a distraction to careers and can negatively impact careers, are you referring to the type of personal things that came out as a result of litigation that would not otherwise likely be widely reported about an actor? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it misstates previous testimony. Christian, again, Elaine, I don't really know how to answer your question. Elaine, which part are you struggling with? Christian, the whole question. I believe what I said was litigation is negative. If what you're asking me is if there's an article that mentions litigation, it is negative, in my opinion, I would say yes. Elaine, okay, would you agree that this article, that's Deposition Exhibit 5, is negative towards Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection as to article itself, assumes facts not evidence, lacks foundation. Christian, I've never seen Mr. Preziato and calls for speculation. Christian, I've never seen this article, and to answer that, I'd have to read it. Elaine, well, go ahead. Take a moment. You do that. Alex, I'm going to give you back control, and if you want to go page by page with Mr. Carino, let's go ahead and do that then. Christian, can you give me control so I can read it? Is that me? Do I have it? Yeah, okay. Look, give me a minute. Okay, I need to read it. And so he said, all right. Do you want to ask that question again, Elaine? Elaine, would you agree that what is being reported here or some of the negative that distract from the career and maybe potentially impact Mr. Depp's reputation and career? Mr. Preziato, hang on a second. Objection, lacks of foundation. Elaine, yeah, that wasn't what I asked before, but I can't remember what I asked before. So, Mr. Preziato, but nonetheless, with respect to this article, that question lacks foundation as to authenticity, as to distribution of the article, as to whether it was even published, as to the audience, if it was never published, or if it was published to an audience of 10. That depends. Those factors into this question, and there's been no foundation. So that being said, any response would be speculative. So Christian's like, Greg, man, help. Mr. Darren, I'll join in those objections. If you have a way to answer it, it's an article that has misspellings in it, and you can make of it what you will in terms of its impact. Christian, Elaine, the only way I can answer is I think it's likely my opinion that anything that refers to personal litigation falls into the category that I described before. Elaine, okay, that's helpful to me. So in other words, examples of what you mean by litigation can be harmful are reporting other parts of an actor's life that is not part of their roles. Would you agree? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it misstates testimony. Christian, can you repeat that, Elaine? Mr. Preziato, asked and answered. Elaine, it's all right. I'll move on. So are you able to say whether this article had any impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Elaine, and I asked it in a way that probably wasn't clear enough. Are you able to say one way or another whether this article, that's Deposition Exhibit 5, negatively impacts on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Christian, no. Elaine, I'm going to ask you now to take a look at what has been marked as Carino number 6. Alex, if you could pull up that, please. Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what's been marked as Deposition Carino Deposition Exhibit 6. Alex, oh God. So Elaine asked, are you familiar with the Inquisitor? Christian, no. Elaine, and this was June 25th, 2017, shortly after the June 21st article. And were you aware that these types of articles were being published during this time frame? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, one second. Okay, never mind. Elaine, Mr. Carino, do you know one way or another whether this article had any impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? For fuck's sakes, Elaine. Mr. Preziato, 1 second. Wait, with respect to the article itself, it lacks foundation again. There's been no foundation laid. This was even published, let alone how many people viewed it, who the audience was. There hasn't even been a foundation laid that the date, June 25th, 2017, is in fact accurate. So that being said, I object to the question on lack of foundation and calls for speculation. Mr. Darren, I'll object. It assumes facts since the witness says he's not familiar with the publication of the article. Elaine, do you remember the question, Mr. Carino? Christian, nope. Elaine, Paul, could you please read back the question? Christian, no. Elaine, now, would you consider that Rolling Stone's article magazine to have a pretty widespread audience? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, I don't know what your definition of widespread is. Elaine, well, what do you consider it to be? You had indicated that you didn't know Inquisitor, and you didn't consider Hollywood's Gossip to be legitimate publications. Oh my God. The fact that you did, Elaine, is shocking. Do you consider Rolling Stone to be a legitimate publication? Christian, I don't think I ever said that. Mr. Preziato, objection, misstates testimony. Elaine, I'm sorry, Mr. Carino, I did not get your answer. Christian, I just said I don't think I ever used the word legitimate. He didn't. He did not. Elaine, okay, how would you characterize it? Christian, characterize what? Elaine, the Hollywood Gossip and Inquisitor. This is just as bad as Marie Claire. Come on, Elaine. Christian, 2 media outlets I've never read or heard of. Elaine, have you read or heard of the Rolling Stones? Oh my God. She just did that. Elaine just did that and it's gold. Have you ever read or heard of the Rolling Stones? Christian, yes. Elaine, have you read or heard of GQ? Christian, yes. Elaine, I'm going to ask you, Alex, if you can bring up Christian exhibit number 2. Okay, so, it's exhibit number 2. Elaine, Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as Carino Deposition Exhibit 2, and it's a Rolling Stone publication on June 21st, 2018. Do you see that? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay, and the title on it is The Trouble with Johnny Depp, Multiple $1 million Lawsuits, A Haze of Booze and Hash, A Marriage Gone Very Wrong, and a Lifestyle He Can't Afford, Inside the Trials of Mr. Depp. Did you ever read this article? Christian, part of it. Elaine, and Mr. Waldman was also involved in this particular interview and was named in this publication, was he not? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts not in evidence, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Christian, I don't know why you'd ask me. He's either in it or not. I have no idea. Elaine, do you recall? Christian, no. Elaine, do you know one way or the other whether this article in Rolling Stone that's reflected in Carino Deposition Exhibit 2 negatively impacted Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, Elaine, can you differentiate for me whether you're asking me my opinion or you're asking me if I can definitely prove that any one article had a positive or negative effect on somebody's career? Elaine, and actually, I'm asking you one way or the other whether you can speak to that. And so it's not just a matter of opinion. It's also you've indicated you have a number of years in the industry. So an article like this, are you able to say one way or the other? And if the answer is, I don't know, one way or the other, this impacted his career, that's the question I'm asking. So let me just ask it again clean. Are you aware whether this article in the Rolling Stone, June 2018, that's reflected in Carino Exhibit number 2 impacted in a negative way to Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, assumes facts and not evidence, and calls for speculation. He testified that he only read parts of it. Christian, Elaine, I don't think it's possible to ask anyone that question about having done research among the people who read this specific article. If you're asking my opinion about whether an article like this or a particular article, in my opinion, would have a positive or negative effect on someone, career, I could potentially answer that. But as to definitively whether an article has or has not had an impact on someone's career, no one can answer that question without research specifically. Elaine, have you ever conducted any research in connection with Mr. Depp of any conduct, articles, publications, anything, whether they've had a negative impact on his career reputation? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, compound. Elaine, are you aware of anyone who has conducted any kind of research to determine whether any specific conduct or article relating to Mr. Depp have had a negative impact on his reputation or career? Christian, I am not aware of any. Elaine, do you have an opinion as to whether this article impacted Mr. Depp in a negative or positive manner? Mr. Preziato, objection calls for speculation. Christian, my opinion would be I don't think it's about any one article. I think it's about the nature of how much oxygen it takes up by legal issues surrounding an individual. Elaine, do you believe that there was a lot of oxygen taken up by litigation surrounding Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection vague and ambiguous. Christian, are you asking my opinion? Elaine, yes. Christian, yes. Elaine, and why do you believe that? Christian, because there's been a tremendous amount of coverage on the lawsuits around this individual. Elaine, by this individual, you're referring to Johnny Depp? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and I'm going to ask you to now, I'd move for the omission of number 2. I'm going to ask you to take a look at number 3. Mr. Darren. Elaine, after your next exhibit, we've been going for a bit over an hour. If it's a good time for a break, let's do that. Elaine, absolutely, Greg. And if you want to do it now, that's just fine. I appreciate your asking when you need it. That's fine. Do you want to take, what do you want? About 5, 10? What would you like, Greg? Mr. Darren, sure. Let's take a 10 minute break. Elaine, 10 minutes. So for me, oh God, she's just going over the time. 10 minutes. So they're off the record, back on the record. Question. Elaine, Mr. Carino, I think we were just going to start looking at Carino Exhibit 3. And this is an article that was published in November of 2018. Do you recall reading this at some point? Christian, what publication is that? Elaine, it's GQ. Christian, I probably read part of it, but I don't remember. Elaine, well, do you consider articles like this to also be taking up some of the oxygen in connection with the litigation? Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for speculation. He said he can't remember reading it. Christian, I don't know. Elaine, are you able to say one way or the other whether this article that's reflected as Carino Exhibit 3 impacted in a negative way for Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for speculation. Elaine, all right, let's go ahead and bring up number 7. Now, Mr. Carino, before we start talking about this particular lawsuit, do you work with Mr. Mandel at all or his company? Christian, nope. Elaine, so in connection with your representation of Mr. Depp, that didn't create any circumstances where you had to work with them at any time, the business managers? Christian, I don't know when we started representing Johnny, whether he was still attached to them or had already terminated their relationship. But if there were his business managers at the time, I didn't have any direct contact with them. Elaine, have you had any direct contact with Ed White or his company? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and what is the nature of your contact with Ed White and his company? Christian, payment on deals where Johnny was owed money, bill collecting. Elaine, when you say bill collecting, was it collecting on your behalf or was it trying to collect from studios or companies? Christian, the latter. Mr. Preziato, objection vague and ambiguous. Elaine, and so what would your involvement be in these circumstances? Christian, Ed on occasion reached out to me to ask about the timing of a payment that was owed to Johnny. Elaine, all right. And were you able to answer those questions? Christian, I think in all cases, I just referred him to somebody who worked for me to find out what the payment schedule was. Elaine, other than these occasions where Ed White would reach out to you and ask the timing of payments, did you have any other connection or communication with Ed White or his company in connection with Johnny Depp? Christian, no. Elaine, were you familiar with Jake Bloom? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and what is your understanding of Jake Bloom's relationship with Mr. Depp? Christian, I'm not sure what you're asking. Elaine, do you know whether Mr. Bloom ever represented Mr. Depp? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and what was your understanding of the nature of that representation? Christian, he was his lawyer. Elaine, did you ever work with Jake Bloom in connection with Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection vague, ambiguous as to capacity. Christian, what are you asking, Elaine? Exactly. Elaine, I'm asking if you had any communication or worked at all with Mr. Bloom in connection with Mr. Depp. Mr. Preziato, objection compound. Christian, I guess I'm still not sure how to answer that. Elaine, did you ever talk to Jake Bloom? Christian, yes. Elaine, on how many occasions? Mr. Preziato, well, objection vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, objection vague and ambiguous. Are you asking if you talked to Jake Bloom with regard to the details relating to Johnny Depp? Elaine, I was first just trying to establish if he had any conversation with him because he was having difficulty with my question. Then I was going to ask him about the nature of the conversation. Mr. Preziato, any conversation? Mr. Darren, are you asking over his 16 years as an agent, or are you asking... Elaine, well, we'll get there. We'll get to those questions. But he was confused by my question, so I'm breaking it down. Everyone was confused by your question, Elaine. Mr. Preziato, but the point, Elaine, is that your question is vague and ambiguous and framed because it's impossible for him to tell what time period you're speaking of and the like, but go ahead, ask your question. Elaine, I think I already asked him and he already answered it. Elaine, maybe he can move on. Maybe we can move on from there, okay? Mr. Preziato, yeah, let's do that. Elaine, on how many occasions did you speak with Jake Bloom relating to Mr. Depp? Christian, I have no idea. Elaine, was it pretty frequently? Christian, what does that mean? Elaine, well, was it more than 10? Mr. Preziato, objection vague, ambiguous as to time period. Christian, are you asking me if I had approximately 10 conversations with Jake over the duration of our relationship? Elaine, yes. I actually asked if you had more than 10. I wasn't asking if it was exactly 10. Christian, okay, I mean, I'm guessing that it was probably less than 10 total. Elaine, and what was the duration of the relationship of Mr. Bloom in connection with Mr. Depp while you were representing Mr. Depp? Do you understand my question? Christian, I think I do, and I'll answer is, I don't know. Elaine, was Mr. Bloom still representing Mr. Depp when you started representing Mr. Depp? Christian, I believe so, but I'm not sure. Elaine, and when did you start representing Mr. Depp? Christian, I believe it was in late 2016. Elaine, Mr. Carino, are you looking at something to be able to refresh your recollection? Christian, I am. Elaine, what do you have in front of you? Christian, a note that I made to myself of the date and when Johnny was a client, and I think I wrote down October 2016. Elaine, okay, when you say a note, is this a handwritten note? Are you looking at your computer? What are you doing? Christian, what does it matter, Elaine? Elaine, well, typically when there's a deposition, it's a little difficult in this situation, Christian, because we have to do Zoom and we're not all sitting in a conference room together. And typically a deponent does not have anything in front of them that they're being asked. And then if they don't recall something, they can say they don't recall. And then if they can show them something to refresh the recollection, maybe not. Christian, I'm looking at a note that I handwrote a date on top of one of the two binders with all the exhibits that I was given by counsel. And I took the note when I was in discussions with counsel about this deposition. And I asked specifically what date Johnny became a client because I figured at some point you would ask that. And I didn't know. Elaine, so you have that in front of you that says October 2016? Christian, yeah. Elaine, all right then. And then you said you have two binders in front of you. What's in those binders? Christian, Greg, I don't know how to classify what is. Mr. Darren, so I'm going to object to the extent that Mr. Carino, that calls for attorney-client privilege. I will represent to you that in preparing for the deposition, Mr. Carino looked at some documents to refresh his recollection. They are all documents that have been produced to you. There is nothing that was not produced in the counsel in the course of in response to his subpoena. Elaine, so Mr. Carino, in preparation for your deposition today, have you reviewed the documents that are in those binders? Christian, only a few of them. Elaine, do you recall which ones you reviewed? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you have anything else in front of you other than the two binders and the note with the October 2016 date? Christian, some coffee. Elaine, I have no objection to the coffee. You may have as much of that as you want. Oh, thank you, Elaine. Such an angel. Oh, bless. So she goes on, what I'm going to ask you to do, and Greg, please let me know if you ever any issue with that we can discuss it. I'm going to ask you not to look at the binders until you tell us that you need to look at the binders. Then what I'm going to ask you is to identify specifically what you're looking at if you do need to consult them, okay? Christian, sure. Elaine is petrified that they're keeping shit from her. Why? Because they kept shit from them. I'm sure of it. Okay. Elaine, all right. So in other words, unless you need to look at them, I'd ask you to try to answer these questions to the best of your recollection. If you cannot recall and you believe that something in the binders could refresh your recollection, please let me know that, all right? Christian, yes. Elaine, great. Okay, so you started your representation of Mr. Depp in October of 2016, correct? Christian, I believe so. Elaine, do you recall whether Mr. Bloom was representing Mr. Depp at the time you started your representation of Mr. Depp in October of 2016? Christian, I'm not sure. Elaine, when you indicated that you thought you had less than 10 conversations with Mr. Bloom, do you recall whether Mr. Bloom was, Mr. Bloom, do you recall whether Mr. Bloom was representing Mr. Depp at that time when you had the conversation? Let me ask that a little bit cleaner. When you indicated in response to an earlier question that you had less than 10 conversations with Mr. Bloom in connection with Mr. Depp, do you have a recollection of whether Mr. Bloom was still representing Mr. Depp when you had those conversations? Christian, I'm not sure. Elaine, okay. Do you have a recollection of the context of your discussion with Mr. Bloom? Christian, yeah. Elaine, what do you recall? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it calls for hearsay. So Mr. Darren pipes up and he says, the hearsay is not a problem. I don't know if any of them are privileged, but the hearsay is not a problem. So Christian, my recollection of the conversation I had with Jake were in regard to getting Johnny and Jake to meet and work out whatever issues were around their disagreement. Elaine, so you were trying to broker, if you will, a discussion between them trying to resolve their issue? Christian, correct. Elaine, were you successful in that? Christian, I don't remember whether they got together to meet about it, to be honest. Elaine, other than communicating with Mr. Bloom to see if he could meet or talk with Mr. Depp to work out their difference, did you have any other discussions with Mr. Bloom on any other topic? Christian, no. Elaine, now I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition number 7. And this is the lawsuit that was filed on October 17th, 2017. Were you aware of this litigation being filed by Mr. Depp on his behalf against Bloom, Herga, Deemer, etc.? Christian, yeah. Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Elaine, and were you involved in any of this litigation? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Elaine, do you know one way or the other the filing of the ongoing litigation associated with the lawsuit had any negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Mr. Darren, join. Christian, I said no, Elaine. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Elaine, thank you. Would you agree that this is additional oxygen in your words? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, if you're asking me about the document, I would say no. Elaine, the litigation. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous, calls for speculation, lacks foundation. Christian, again, the answer is no. Elaine, and why not? Christian, it's not the litigation, it's the coverage of litigation. Big difference, Elaine. That was my addition, not Christian's? Okay. Elaine, and what do you mean by that? Christian, the extent to which the litigation is public. Elaine, do you recall whether there was any publicity around this litigation that's reflected in the complaint that is Carino number 7? Christian, can you say that again, Elaine? Elaine, Paul, can you read that for me? So Paul does. Christian, Elaine, are you asking me if I'm aware if the Jake Bloom litigation was made public? Elaine, yeah. Christian, yes. Elaine, in addition to being made public, do you recall whether there was a publicity surrounding the Jake Bloom litigation? Christian, yes. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Elaine, and do you recall whether there was publicity around the Mandel litigation? Christian, yes. Elaine, and would you agree that the publicity contributed to the oxygen that you are referring to, takes up space and distracts from, may negatively impact an actor's career? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts not on evidence, calls for speculation. Mr. Darren joined in. So Mr. Darren said, I joined in the objection to the extent that you can answer it as you will. Christian, Elaine, I guess I would just go back to what I said in my personal opinion. Media litigation coverage is negative. Elaine, so any media coverage of the Bloom litigation or the Mandel litigation would be negative, correct? Christian, in my opinion, yes. Elaine, and that's based on your years as a talent agent in this industry. Christian, yes, and just being a human being, that's my opinion. Elaine, and would you agree that the publicity surrounding the litigation, the Jake Bloom litigation and the Mandel litigation, would have a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career? Christian, didn't you ask me that already? Elaine, not exactly that question. Christian, say it again. So it was read back. Mr. Preziato, lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Christian, I don't really know, Elaine. You keep asking me the same question. All I can say to you is it's not possible to answer that question without doing research, quantitative research. And I think what I said was if you have the choice of having media coverage about being in a lawsuit versus not being in a lawsuit, it's better. The latter is better. That's my opinion. Elaine, and the latter is better because? Christian, what's your question? Elaine, because why? Mr. Preziato, objection vague and ambiguous. Christian, in my opinion, is that people don't want to hear about litigation. Elaine, thank you. I'm going to ask, Alex, can you bring up number 8? Mr. Preziato, I'm sorry, Elaine. I may have missed it, but I didn't hear you. Is this the first exhibit you're asking to be admitted as number 8? I mean, number 7? Elaine, no, actually, I've been moving the admission of all of them. Mr. Preziato, oh, I didn't hear you do that. So I would object to the admission of, I think it's number 6, the Inquisitor article, lack of foundation, lack of authenticity. Same with respect to Exhibit 2 and 3. The Bloom complaint, I would object to its admission on the basis of relevance, and same with respect to Exhibit 4, the Mandel complaint. And Exhibit 5, I would object to its admission based on lack of authenticity and lack of foundation. I think I covered all of them, okay? I did. Elaine, and now we have number 8, correct? Mr. Carino, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Carino Deposition 8, and I think this is Eugene Arolia and Miguel Sanchez against Mr. Depp, and we can go up. Elaine, do we have the date on there, Alex? Can we find it on there? Mr. Preziato, also with respect to all of the articles, I would object to their admission on the basis of hearsay. Elaine, Alex, I think it's going to be at the bottom. Oh, fuck, she's just trying to find. Okay, so Elaine, May 1st, 2018. Do you see that? Mr. Darren, is this a filed lawsuit? Elaine, well, the lawsuit was filed. I don't know personally whether it was a particular copy was filed. Mr. Preziato, it doesn't have the file stamp on it. Mr. Darren, I just asked because there's no case number. Elaine, right. Mr. Darren, on the first page. Elaine, right. This case was filed, is my understanding. This was produced, I believe, by Mr. Depp. Elaine, so do you recall 2 bodyguards being in a lawsuit against Mr. Depp? Christian, no. Elaine, all right, let's go ahead and bring up number 10. Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you, what has been marked as Deposition Exhibit 10? And in particular, one we have, this is an article that was written in the Sun Times. That was the beginning of, if you will, of the UK lawsuit. Do you have a recollection of seeing that? Christian, no. Elaine, did you ever read it? Christian, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure I read at least part of it if it's the original document that caused the Sun legal issue. Elaine, do you remember having any communications with anyone about this article? Christian, nope. Elaine, now the date on this one is April 27th, 2018. Do you see that there? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay. And are you aware of one way or the other whether there was any negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career as a result of the publication of this article? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, assumes facts and not evidence, calls for speculation. Christian, can you repeat the question, Elaine? Christian, so he just responded no. Elaine, I'm going to ask you to take a look at Carino Deposition Exhibit 11. Mr. Preziato, I would object to the admission of number 10 on the basis of relevance, lack of foundation. Elaine, Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you what has been marked as Carino Deposition Exhibit 11, and it's dated June 13th, 2018. It's hard to see that little stamp there, but it was filed on June 13th, 2018, and it's Mr. Depp filing the newspaper limited, The Sun and Dan Wooten. Were you aware that Mr. Depp brought the lawsuit in the UK against The Sun and Mr. Wooten? Christian, yeah. Mr. Preziato, objection vague and ambiguous as to time. Elaine, how did you become aware of it? Christian, I don't remember. Elaine, do you recall discussing with Mr. Depp or anyone else that before this was filed, whether this should be filed or what the possible implication may be? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, 1, okay. Elaine, do you recall discussing with Mr. Depp or anyone else the implications of having filed this suit after it was filed? Mr. Preziato, 1 second. I would object to the extent, Mr. Carino, to the extent of any of the communication also included an attorney of Johnny Depp. I would instruct you not to answer. To the extent an attorney wasn't involved, you can answer. Christian, nope. Elaine, did you, as a result of the objection and the instruction, did you withhold any answer as a result of that? In other words, were there potentially attorney-client communications with someone that was Mr. Depp's attorney? Mr. Darren, do you understand? She's asking whether you discussed the implications of the filing of with an attorney, and therefore you're not answering based on the instruction from counsel just now. Okay. They're just saying, like, he just doesn't know if he should answer it or not. So he just says, Elaine, the answer is no. Elaine, okay, I just wanted to make sure we had a clear record on that. Thank you. Are you aware, one way or the other, whether the filing of this lawsuit in the UK had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection calls for speculation. Christian, no. Elaine, take this one down, Alex. We're going to now put up number 11. Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what's been marked as Carino Exhibit 12. This was published in the Washington Post on December 18th, 2018. Were you aware of this article? Christian, yeah. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous as a time. Elaine, when did you become aware of this op-ed? Christian, I don't remember. Elaine, do you recall whether it was 2018 or later? Christian, no. Elaine, and how did you learn about this op-ed? Christian, I don't remember how I learned about it. Elaine, are you aware one way or the other where this op-ed that reflected as Carino Exhibit 12 had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, are you asking my opinion? Or are you asking factually whether I have research to show that this negatively impacted or didn't negatively impact his career? Elaine, I'm asking the same question that you answered for all the other exhibits. And when you've been saying no, you don't know one way or the other. And you're answering as an opinion, or are you answering as factual basis? Oh, Christian, now you've lost me. I don't know what you're asking me anymore. Mr. Preziato, yeah, objection to the extent that assumes facts, not an evidence, misstates testimony. Elaine, when I ask you on Exhibit 11 whether you were aware, Christian, what was 11? Elaine, which one was 11 exactly, because she missed it. Elaine fucked up. Okay. Elaine fucked up. So Elaine goes back. Mr. Carino, when I asked you whether you were aware one way or the other whether this lawsuit that's reflected in Exhibit 11 has a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career, you answered no. What did you mean by that? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it misstates testimony. Christian, I meant that there isn't a way for any individual to know whether the filing of a document had an impact on someone's career, positive or negative, without specific research, conduct, and exact that case. Elaine, and when I asked you that about Mr. Wooten's op-ed, is what you meant as well as that when you said no? What? Christian, which document was that, Elaine? Elaine, Alex, we're going to have to go through them all again, I guess, so pull up the... Christian, I meant the same thing. Elaine, okay, and when I asked about the Brooks lawsuit? Christian, the what lawsuit? Elaine, Christian, the Bloom lawsuit? Elaine, yeah, let me go to let's pull up number 7. Christian, same. Elaine, okay, the same as in the facts because you haven't researched it. You don't know whether it impacted Mr. Depp's reputation or career, correct? Christian, I believe I stated that unless someone had done research specifically about the filing of the document and its impact on one way or the other, it's impossible to answer the question. Elaine, okay, let's go back to number 12. Do you know one way or the other what has... Christian, I'd answer it the same way. Elaine, let me just finish the question so it's clear on the record, please. I was going to show you what has been marked as Carino Exhibit number 12. Do you know one way or the other whether this op-ed had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Lacks foundation. Elaine. Oh, now we're bringing up number 9. Oh my God. She's like, I think I missed that one. Thank you for bringing it. She's a hot mess today. I'm going to show you. So this is just Elaine. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 9. This is a lawsuit that was filed July 2018, July 6th by an individual named Greg Rocky Brooks against Mr. Depp and others. Do you recall this lawsuit? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware that an employee who was, though local, I think was the local manager in some filming contends that Mr. Depp punched him on set? Christian, nope. Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it misstates, assumes facts, not evidence. Elaine, are you aware that there is a current litigation still pending against Mr. Depp by Mr. Brooks, who contends Mr. Depp punched him? Christian, no. Elaine, Mr. Preziato, objection asked and answered. Elaine, do you know one way or the other, Mr. Preziato, and misstates the record? Elaine, do you know one way or the other whether this lawsuit reflected as Exhibit 9, Carino 9, has a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, I don't think I can answer that. I don't even know what it is. Elaine, I would guess that you wouldn't know one way or the other, would you? Mr. Prezziato, objection, misstates testimony. Elaine, Mr. Carino, if you weren't aware of this. Mr. Prezziato, argumentative. Elaine goes on, would it not fair to say that you do not know one way or the other whether this lawsuit has negatively affected Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, if I'm not aware? Mr. Prezziato, argumentative. Christian, if I'm not aware of it, I'm not aware of it. How can I answer any questions about it? Elaine, but do you have any reason to believe that it has negatively impacted Mr. Depp's career? Oh my God. Christian, Elaine, I said I don't know about it. How can I answer that question? I can't answer your question. Elaine, I completely understand that you said you don't know about it, but I'm entitled to ask my questions to lay my foundation. And I'm asking, are you able to say whether the existence of this lawsuit has had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, if I'm not aware about it, oh God, Mr. Prezziato, objection, calls for speculation. Christian, so this is what he said, if I'm not aware of the lawsuit itself, how can I even answer the question? Elaine, wouldn't your answer be no? Mr. Prezziato, objection, argumentative. Mr. Darren is joining in. Christian, if my answer was no, I would have said no. I can't answer this question. Elaine, and you can't answer the question because, oh my God, everyone scream with me into the void. This is the most insufferable woman I have ever witnessed in my life. And I have met many, many an insufferable person. Oh my God. Oh, okay. Mr. Prezziato, objection asked and answered. Mr. Darren, he said it lacks foundation and I join. There's no basis to answer your question. Lacks foundation. Mr. Prezziato, calls for speculation. Elaine, are you refusing to answer my question, Mr. Carino? Christian, I answered your question. Elaine, I'm sorry, what was the answer? Christian, I can't answer your question. Elaine, because, Christian, I'm not aware of the suit. Elaine, I'm going to ask you to take a look at Carino Exhibit 13. Oh my God. Now, this is a copy of a tweet by Mr. Waldman on May 12, 2020. Are you aware that Mr. Waldman republished the op-ed from Ms. Heard? Christian, no. Laney, on May 12, 2020. Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. And Christian's is like, Elaine, my answer is no. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because of the objection. So Elaine goes on, do you have any understanding of how large an audience Mr. Waldman has for his tweets? Christian, I do not follow him. Elaine, did you tell him that when you talked to him? Christian, no. Elaine, okay. I think it's fair to assume then that you cannot say one way or the other whether Mr. Waldman's tweet of the op-ed had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career. Is that correct? Christian, I would answer it in the same way that I answered the last question about the last document, which is, if I'm not aware of it, how could I possibly answer that question? Elaine, well, you can answer my question, Mr. Carino. It's just that you can't say yes. I'm sure that it had an impact on it because you said you weren't aware of it, right? What? I'm sure that it had an impact on it because you said you weren't aware of it, right? That made no sense. So Elaine is sure that it made an impact because Christian Carino had no fucking clue what was going on. Oh my God. Mr. Prezziato, objection, argumentative. Elaine, I'll go a lot faster if you respond to the questions. Oh, Mr. Prezziato, he is. Elaine, no, actually, he's not. He hasn't responded to that one. He didn't respond to the earlier one. Mr. Prezziato, well, there's a difference between you not liking the answer, Elaine, and him not responding. Big difference. Elaine, it's not about me liking it or not. Mr. Prezziato, he's entitled to the answer that he thinks it's appropriate. If you don't like it, it doesn't mean he's not answering the question. Elaine, it's not about me liking it, and that's inappropriate. All right, let's go to number 14. I'll move the omission of 13. Elaine, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Carino number 14. This is the lawsuit that Mr. Depp filed against Ms. Heard. Elaine, if we scroll down so we can got the date on this, Alex, I think we got it right there. Okay, if it was filed on March 1st, 2019, are you familiar with this lawsuit? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. Mr. Darren, objection, vague and ambiguous. When you say familiar, do you mean is he aware of the substance of the claims? Elaine, okay, were you aware this lawsuit was filed? Christian, yes. Elaine, and when did you become aware of this lawsuit was filed? Christian, I don't know. Elaine, do you recall having any conversations with Mr. Depp or anyone else about the wisdom of filing this lawsuit? Christian, no. Mr. Prezziato, objection again to the extent that Mr. Carino any attorney was involved in that, any such conversations to the extent they were had, I would instruct you not to answer. Otherwise, you can answer. Elaine, do you recall having any conversations with anyone? Christian, no. I answered Elaine because everyone, Mr. Darren. Christian, you need to pause for 2 reasons. One is to let counsel get her question on the record. The second is allow Mr. Depp's counsel to interpose an objection. If he thinks it's inappropriate, it's appropriate, including in a case such as this, if he thinks there's an attorney-client privilege. Elaine, do you recall having any conversations with Mr. Depp or anyone else about the potential impact of that filing this lawsuit would have and the attended publicity on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, and again, Mr. Carino, to the extent, was your answer no? Elaine, there was no lag time. Are you able to, what? Okay, sorry. I'm striking that from my own record. Elaine, are you able to say one way or the other what the impact, strike that, I'm going to ask it differently. Mr. Carino, are you aware of whether the filing of this lawsuit and the attendant publicity had a negative impact on the reputation and career of Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, calls for speculation, lacks foundation. Christian, can Paul reread that, Elaine? Christian, Elaine, are you asking me the factual question or the opinion? Elaine, are you able to answer the factual question? Christian, no. Elaine, are you able to answer the opinion? Christian, I don't know what you're asking me. Elaine, I will ask you a clean question based on what you just said. Are you able to? I'm going to ask a different one. Sorry, strike that. Do you believe that the filing of this lawsuit reflected in Carino Deposition Exhibit 14 and the intended publicity has had a negative impact on the reputation and career of Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation with respect to the filing of the document. Christian, no. Elaine, and why not? Christian, because I've stated previously, it's not about the filing of a lawsuit, it's about the coverage. Elaine, do you believe the coverage of this lawsuit reflected in Carino Exhibit number 14 has a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation, and ambiguous, calls for speculation. Christian, Paul, can you reread that? So Christian said, I believe that the coverage of any lawsuit is not positive. Elaine, and why? What do you mean by that? Oh my God, Elaine. Mr. Preziato, objection asked and answered. Christian, I think you have asked me that several times and I've answered it in the same way. Elaine, so I am to understand that your opinion is that the coverage of the lawsuit reflected as Carino number 14 has had a positive impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career? Christian, no, that's not what I said. Mr. Preziato, objection, misstates testimony. Elaine, when you said coverage of any lawsuit is not positive, and I'm asking you specifically about whether this has a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career, how do you reconcile those? Christian, my opinion. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, my opinion is not directed at this document, or this filing, or this lawsuit, or Johnny or Amber. My opinion that I've stated repeatedly is that I do not believe that the media coverage related to any lawsuit about anything on any topic has a positive impact on somebody's perception and career. Elaine, and what would that include, Mr. Depp? And would that include Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, it's not specific to Mr. Depp or Amber or anyone. Elaine, but would you apply it to Mr. Depp? Christian, it applies to everyone. Elaine, including Mr. Depp? Christian, sure. Mr. Preziato, objection asked and answered. Elaine, would you agree that there has been a great deal of publicity generated as a result of the UK lawsuit? Mr. Preziato, objection lacks foundation. Christian, you have to define a great deal. Elaine, well, what do you consider to be a great deal of publicity? Christian, when a significant portion of the population and someone's fan base is exposed to it. Elaine, can you give me an example? Christian, nope. Elaine, when you say significant portion of the population, what do you mean by that? Christian, I don't know how to make that any clearer. Elaine, what do you consider a significant portion of the population? Christian, I don't know. Elaine, do you consider 1,000 to be a significant portion of the population? Christian, no. Elaine, 10,000. Christian, no. Elaine, 100,000. Christian, no. Elaine, 500,000. Christian, no. Elaine, 1 million? Christian, probably close. Elaine, 1 million too? Christian, There's no number, Elaine. Elaine, but when you're getting to the range of reaching 1 million, that's a significant portion of the population from your perspective? Christian, sure. Elaine, okay. And when you say a significant portion of someone's fan base, what do you consider to be a significant portion of the fan base? Christian, I would say on a percent basis, I would say 10%. Elaine, and do you go about researching 10% of someone's fan base? Christian, I don't. Elaine, would you say that the publicity surrounding the UK litigation reached a significant portion of the population of Mr. Depp's fan base? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague, ambiguous, lacks foundation, and calls for speculation, and just a stupid question. Christian, I don't know, Elaine. Elaine, you agree that if the publicity surrounding the UK litigation did reach a significant portion of the population, and let me ask that a different way and strike that, would you agree that if the publicity surrounding the UK litigation reached in excess of 1 million people and at least 10% of the Depp's fan base, that would have a negative impact on his reputation and career? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts, not an evidence, calls for speculation, also improper hypothetical. Christian, Elaine, I think I've answered that question, and the way I've answered it is, I think my opinion is that any lawsuits that are public and, rise to the level of being public in a significant way are negative for anyone, regardless of the lawsuit. Elaine, do you have a sense of whether the publicity surrounding the litigation reflected in Carino Exhibit 14, the lawsuit by Mr. Depp against Ms. Heard, has reached a significant portion of the population of Mr. Depp's fan base? Mr. Preziato, objection, asked and answered, calls for speculation, lacks foundation. Christian, Paul, can you just read that first half of the question? And Christian answered, I do not, Elaine. Elaine, do you think that it did? Christian, that's not what the question was. Elaine, do you not believe that the publicity surrounding this litigation, Carino Exhibit 14? Christian, I don't. I don't know whether it has or it hasn't. Elaine, okay, I'm going to ask you now to take a look at Exhibit 15. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Carino Exhibit 15, and it is the judgment that was entered by the UK court. Ooh, her favorite thing. She sleeps with that thing. UK court against Mr. Depp and in favor of the news group Newspapers Limited and Mr. Wooten. You're aware of this, correct? Christian, aware of. Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it mischaracterizes the document. You can answer. Mr. Darren, and I'll object to the question as phrase lacks foundation. When you say this, do you mean that there was a judgment or he was aware of the document? Elaine, I was trying to correct that when I got in the field of objection, so I'll ask it cleaner here. Mr. Carino, I'm going to show you what is Carino Exhibit 15. This is the judgment issued on November 2nd, 2020 by Mr. and Justice Nicol against Mr. Depp and in favor of the news group Newspapers Limited and Mr. Wooten. And I sleep with it every night because I love it so much. Were you aware that this judgment was handed down on November 11th, 2020? Mr. Preziato, objection to the extent it mischaracterizes the document. Christian, I am. If you're asking me that I'm aware that there was a judgment, the answer is yes. Elaine, okay. What was your understanding of what the judgment was? Christian, that the judge found against Johnny. Mr. Preziato, and I would interpose the lack of foundation objection prior to his answer. Elaine, did you read any portion of this document? Christian, I did not. Elaine, I'm sorry? Christian, I did not. Elaine, why not? Christian, I don't know what not. I just didn't. Elaine, did you have any understanding of whether there was a publicity associated with this judgment? Christian, yes. Elaine, and what is your understanding of that amount of publicity that was generated as a result of this judgment in the UK? Christian, you have to be more specific at what you're asking. Elaine, what was your understanding of the level of publicity that was garnered as a result of this judgment being handed down on November 2nd, 2020 from Justice Nicol? Christian, I was exposed to a significant amount of coverage of the decision. Elaine, do you believe that at least 10% of Mr. Depp's fan base was exposed to the news coverage surrounding? Mr. Preziato, objection, calls for speculation. Christian, I don't know. Mr. Preziato, based on previous testimony. Elaine, are you aware, one way or the other, this judgment reflected in Exhibit 15, the UK litigation had a negative impact on the reputation and career of Mr. Depp? Christian, yes. Mr. Preziato, objection, asked and answered. And Elaine wanted to know, and what are you aware of? Christian, I'm aware that the studio in control of the movie that Johnny was cast in asked him to step aside following the publicity surrounding the judgment. Elaine, and how do you become aware of that? Christian, I was made aware of it internally at work. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last. You were made aware of it internally at work? Christian, at CAA. Elaine, and do you recalling what? And who do you recall telling you at CAA? Christian, I believe I was told by Brian Lord. Elaine, do you recall when you learned of the termination of Mr. Depp from the movie by Mr. Lord? Christian, no. Elaine, did you have any communication with Mr. Depp after you learned that he had been terminated from the movie relating to that? Christian, no. Elaine, did you have any discussions with Mr. Depp about the judgment at all? Christian, nope. Elaine, to this day, had you had any discussions with Mr. Depp about this judgment? Christian, nope. Elaine, to this day, have you had any discussions with Mr. Depp about the implications of this judgment? And I'm referring to Exhibit 15, the UK court decision? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware of any other negative impacts on Mr. Depp to his reputation and career other than him being asked to step aside in the movie he was filming as a result of the UK decision that's reflected in Exhibit 15? Christian, I think there's like 400 questions embedded in that question, so you have to break it apart. Mr. Prezziato, objection. So Elaine asked Paul to read it back. So Christian said, Elaine, I don't know if you're waiting for me, but I think I can answer that question the way it was asked. You have to break it apart. Elaine, it's only one question. It's, are you aware any other negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation or career other than being asked to step aside from the movie as a result of the UK judgment reflected in Exhibit 14 at issue? Christian, I don't think I testified to reputation. I think I testified to direct impact on the verdict being made public in one business that he was attached to. Elaine, all right. Are there any others you're aware of? Christian, no. Actually there is, so yes is the answer. Elaine, what are those? Christian, the other one was he was attached to a television project on Houdini, and that also went away at the time, loosely attached. Elaine, when you say attached to a TV project, what do you mean by that? Christian, it was intended for Johnny to play Houdini and be executive producer on a limited television series and was being put together. Oh, that would have been awesome. Anyway, Elaine, who was putting that together? Christian, who? From where? Like what? Elaine, was it a studio? Was it independent? Who? Christian, it was the Village Roadshow. Elaine, and how was it you learned of that situation, learned of the Houdini project went away, I guess, in your words, after the UK judgment was handed down? Christian, they started to look at other talent. Elaine, and how do you know that? Christian, because they called me and told me? Elaine, and who specifically called you and told you that? Christian, the head of Village Roadshow. Elaine, do you have his name? Christian, Steve Moscow. Elaine, and do you recall Mr. Moscow saying in his call to you? Christian, just I was just what I suggested, that they started to inquire about other talent. Elaine, what did Mr. Moscow say about the impact of the UK decision reflecting in number 15? Christian, nothing. Elaine, and when you say that he said they started to look at new talent, do you remember his words? Christian, no. Elaine, but you derive from it that Mr. Depp was no longer being considered. Christian, yeah. Elaine, for the Houdini project, so we're clear, is that correct? Christian, correct. Elaine, okay. And do you recall how soon after the UK decision was handed down that you had that telephone conversation with Mr. Moscow? Christian, I don't know exactly, but within weeks of it? Elaine, okay. Are you aware of any other negative impact that Mr. Depp has experienced on reputation or career as a result of the UK decision being handed down? Christian, in terms of business decision? No. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question about as including reputation. Elaine, are you able to speak to Mr. Depp's reputation currently? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, I don't know how to answer that, Elaine. Elaine, all right. If I were to ask you what Mr. Depp's reputation is, can you answer that? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, Elaine, I still don't know how to answer that question. Elaine, is there any point in time since you represented Mr. Depp in October of 2016 to the present that you would be able to speak to what you believe Mr. Depp's reputation is? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous, lacks foundation. Christian, Elaine, what I'm having difficulty answering is how to define reputation. Like, what exactly are you asking me to comment on? Elaine, what do you consider reputation to mean? Christian, I would say somebody's reputation is what they are known for. Elaine, applying that definition, how would you describe Mr. Depp's reputation today? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, I mean, you're asking me what my opinion is of what Johnny's reputation is today. Is that what you're asking? Elaine, yeah. Christian, my opinion of what Johnny's reputation today is, one of the finest actors of his generation. Elaine, has, in your opinion, has Mr. Depp's reputation changed in any point from October 2016 to the present? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, if you're asking me if what I define as his reputation has changed in terms of him being viewed as one of the best actors of his generation, I would say no. Elaine, so just so I'm clear that I understand your answer, in your opinion, Mr. Depp's reputation is that he is one of the finest actors of his generation, and that has to be his reputation since you started representing him in October of 2016. It still is today, and it hasn't changed during that time frame. Is that correct? Christian, the view on his acting ability has not changed. Elaine, is there anything else about Mr. Depp's reputation that has changed in view? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, you'd have to define that for me. Elaine, well, I'm asking your definition. You've defined reputation as what they are known for. And then you've told me that Mr. Depp's reputation is that he's one of the finest actors of his generation. And then I asked you whether that reputation of being known as one of the finest actors in his generation has changed at any point between October 2016, when you began your representation, through to the present. And if I'm understanding you, you said no, there has been no change. Is that correct? Christian, that's correct. The view on his acting capabilities has not changed. Elaine, and it currently appears to me that you are trying to have a caveat there. So I'm trying to understand what you mean by the caveat. Is there something else about the view of Mr. Depp that has impacted his reputation or his career? Mr. Prezziato, objection, compound, and argumentative. Elaine, do you understand my question? Christian, probably not. Elaine, okay, is there any other thing that Mr. Depp is known for that has been impacted between the time you started representing him in October 2016 through to the present? Christian, Paul, can you read back that one more time? Sorry. And then Mr. Prezziato, objection. He said it was overbroad. Mr. Darren also put in vague and ambiguous. Christian, yeah, Elaine, I'm just not sure how to answer it. Elaine, well, I'm taking your Elaine. I'm taking your definition of reputation. You said what they are known for. So I'm taking that specific definition and I'm asking, is there anything other than that Mr. Depp is one of the finest actors of his generation that he is known for that has changed between October 2016 and the present? Christian, the only way I can answer that is as it relates to his professional capabilities. That has not changed. Elaine, is there something that has changed that doesn't relate to his professional capabilities? Mr. Prezziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, I don't know how to answer that, Elaine. Elaine, well, I'm trying to understand if you have an opinion as to Mr. Depp's representation outside of that he's one of the finest actors of his generation and that his professional capabilities have not been affected. Mr. Prezziato, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, joining in. Christian, I don't think I can answer that question. Elaine, okay, using your definition of reputation, which is what a person is known for? Is there any aspect of what Mr. Depp is known for that has changed between October 2016 and the present? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous, lacks foundation. Christian, again, I think that's too ambiguous of a question for me to answer. Elaine, what part of it are you having trouble with? I'm going to see if we can work on it. Is it the time frame? Christian, no. I've stated what I think his reputation is, and I've stated that in my opinion, his professional reputation as it relates to the quality of his acting abilities has remained unchanged. Elaine, do you make any distinction between personal and professional reputation? Christian, yeah. Elaine, what is that distinction? Christian, a difference between what somebody does on screen and off screen. Elaine, what is your opinion of what Mr. Depp was known for off screen when you started representing him in October of 2016? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, lacks foundation. Okay. And so Christian wanted to know how he should answer. Mr. Darren said, if you have a basis for answering this question as to what he was known for off screen as it affected your business and your knowledge, then you can answer it. If you don't, if it was none of your business, then Christian, Elaine, I think what he is known for off screen was a shroud of mystery of who he was because he was not visible to the public. I agree. Elaine, and was that back in October of 2016? That's been his whole career, Elaine. Keep up. Christian, I don't have a specific date for that. Elaine, but when you started representing him, that was your sense? Christian, yes. Elaine, okay, did that change over time? Christian, yes. Elaine, and when did that change? Christian, it changed with the exposure of that came with those lawsuits. Elaine, and the lawsuits we're talking about are the ones that we've already taken a look at. Exhibit 4, 7, 8, 9, 11, 15. No, I mean 14. Christian, I'm not talking about any one or two specifically in general. Elaine, all right. And how would you say that Mr. Depp's personal reputation has changed over the period from October 2016 to the present using our definition? Christian, I don't know how to answer that. Elaine, do you believe that Mr. Depp is still a shroud of mystery, not visible to the public? Christian, nope. Elaine, and when did that change? Christian, I don't know specifically when. I'll tell you when he married that... Elaine, would you say that it was cumulative over time as a result of all the litigation and publicity ensuing? Christian, probably. Elaine, is there any specific litigation that you believe more significantly impacted on Mr. Depp's personal reputation? Christian, can you say that again? Or Paul, can you reread that? Elaine, is there any specific one litigation that you believe most significantly impacted on Mr. Depp's personal reputation, no longer being a shroud of mystery and not visible to the public? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. And then Mr. Darren kicked in. If you don't know whether you have an opinion about it or not. Christian, my opinion is that Amber's accusations would have had the most dramatic impact on his off-screen reputation. Elaine, and which accusations are you talking about? Oh my God, Elaine. Christian, I'm not talking about any one specific accusation. Elaine, when you say Amber's accusations, what do you mean by this? Christian, I mean the things she's accused Johnny of doing, both in that should be made public. Elaine, now those accusations were made public in the divorce back in 2016, correct? Christian, I don't know exactly how or when they were made public. Elaine, but would the accusations in connection with the obtaining of the DVRO have negatively impact? Christian, what's a DVRO? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Elaine, domestic violence restraining order. Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, Paul, can you repeat that? Oh my God. And Mr. Darren, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand the vague and ambiguous. I'm not sure I understand the question. It lacks foundation. Elaine, I'll rephrase because I think it's gotten messy in the process. Do you believe the publicity surrounding Amber filing a lawsuit and obtaining a domestic violence restraining order against Johnny Depp would have been part of the accusations that you believe would have had the most dramatic impact? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks the foundation, calls to speculation. Mr. Darren, incomplete, hypothetical, I think. Mr. Preziato, assumes facts, not an evidence. Elaine, Mr. Carino, are you just thinking? I don't want to interrupt you. Christian, I don't think you've asked me a question. I can answer it because I don't understand what you're asking me exactly. Elaine, Paul, can you read that back? I think I got lost. Mr. Darren, I think there's some fatigue also setting in, Elaine. We've been going, I think, for about an hour and a half now without a break, and it might have got time around now to take some time. Elaine, okay, but can I just ask Greg before that he answered the question, the pending question? Then absolutely. Elaine, all right, let's have Paul read back and then let's get the answer and then we can take a break. Mr. Preziato, the last answer was that he couldn't answer your last question. Elaine, no, I have Paul reading it because he didn't understand that there was a question, and there was a question, and I think it was because it got confused with all the objections that came out. So I'm asking Paul to reread it because it was a question. Mr. Preziato, so after the question was reread, Mr. Preziato, same objection. Christian, Elaine, can you try asking that again? Because I'm honestly not sure exactly what you're asking me. Elaine, okay, you testified that you believe that Amber's accusation would have had the most dramatic impact. And so I'm asking if the lawsuit that Amber filed, the divorce action, and the obtained DVRO would have had a dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's personal reputation. Mr. Preziato, objection, mistakes testimony. He said off-screen reputation, I believe. Christian, Elaine, I guess what I'm having trouble with is the most dramatic. If you could try to ask it to me again. Elaine, Mr. Carino, I wrote down verbatim what you said, and I'm using your words so we don't have confusion. You indicated that Amber's accusations would have had the most dramatic impact, and I'll use off screen, I'll take Leo's suggestion on that. So let me ask again and see if we can get there. Given that you believe Amber's accusations would have had the most dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation, would Amber filing the divorce action and obtaining a DVRO have a dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation? Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Christian, I think the only way I can answer that, Elaine, is by saying I don't think filing for a divorce would have any impact whatsoever. And I'm actually not familiar with the lawsuit to get the restraining order. So I don't know exactly what's in there. But if that was based on claims of or accusations of abuse, then in my opinion, would have had a negative impact on Johnny's off-screen reputation. Elaine, thank you. Mr. Preziato, I would move to strike. I would move to strike as non-responsive and speculative and lacking foundation with the answer itself. Elaine, Greg, we're going to be taking a break now. How long would you like to take a break? I'm mindful it's your lunchtime. Okay, I don't think I'm going to cover that. A little bit longer. Okay, they go off the record. They come back on the record. Okay. Elaine, Mr. Carino, we were talking about Amber's accusations and your view of those, how would have the most dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation. And you were talking about her accusations of domestic abuse and violence, correct? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay. Now, are you aware that the Mandel lawsuit included aspects of Amber Heard's accusations of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp? Christian, no. Elaine, were you aware that the Dan Wooten article published in The Sun included specific accusations by Amber Heard of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp? Elaine, are you aware that the Dan Wooten article published in The Sun so Christian said, the Sun case, is that what you're asking me about? Elaine, yes. Christian, yes. Elaine, well, first the article itself that was in the paper, the why the J.K. Rowling generally happy about employing Mr. Depp, the wife popper. Christian, yes. Elaine, okay. And you're aware that the litigation, the lawsuit, including the particulars of the claim brought by Mr. Depp, included the accusations by Amber Heard of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, yep. Elaine, okay. And you're aware that the UK decision went into significant detail about Amber Heard's allegations or accusations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, right. Mr. Preziato, objection, misstates previous testimony. I believe he testified that he hadn't reviewed the judgment. Maybe I misunderstood. No, that's what he said. Elaine, I didn't ask him that. I asked him if he was aware, and he said yes. He already answered that. Mr. Preziato, so I would move to strike, lack of foundation. You can ask your next question. Elaine, given the number of times that Amber Heard's allegations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp have become the source of publicity, are you able to express an opinion as to when and how much each of those impacted Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation? Christian, I couldn't possibly know how to answer that question. Elaine, I take it you wouldn't be able to? Christian, I just hear the level of compoundness in your question is you'd have to break it down. Elaine, okay, well, we can take them one by one. Given that the Mandel lawsuit included accusations by Amber Heard of DV by Mr. Depp against her, are you able to say how much of Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the Mandel lawsuit? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, lacks foundation. Mr. Darren, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Preziato, I think you answered it, but I don't think we got it on the record. Mr. Darren, I'm sorry, are you talking about the complaint itself or some coverage of the lawsuit? I don't understand the question. Elaine, all of the above. Mr. Darren, vague and ambiguous, compound, vague and ambiguous as to time, compound. Mr. Preziato, and lacks foundation as to the content of the complaint as characterized by counsel. Christian, Greg, do you want me to answer it or no? Mr. Darren, if you understand what is meant by the Mandel lawsuit in the context. Christian, yeah, I know. I don't. I can't answer that, Elaine. Elaine, all right. We're backing up a little bit. So are you aware of any negative impact on Mr. Depp's off-camera reputation as a result of the Mandel litigation, which includes not only the filing of the lawsuit, but the ongoing litigation and publicity surrounding it? And am I asking you, are you aware one way or the other? Christian, am I aware of what? Elaine, Paul, can you reread that, please? Mr. Preziato, objection, compound, vague and ambiguous. Christian, I don't know how to answer that. I'm aware of the coverage of the lawsuit, but there isn't any way for someone to be, I don't think I can answer your question. Elaine, you started to say there isn't any way for someone to what? Christian, there isn't any way to answer that question. I don't think. Elaine, okay. And when you said you were aware of the coverage that surrounded the lawsuit, were you aware that some of that coverage related to Amber Heard's accusations of DV by Mr. Depp? Mr. Preziato, wait a second, objection, lack of foundation. There's been nothing established in this deposition. Those allegations are contained in that complaint. Calls for speculation and lacks foundation. Elaine, I don't agree with that anyway. And Mr. Carino just finished saying he was aware of the coverage, so I think you got to pick and choose. Mr. Preziato, He did not say he was aware of the coverage with respect to the Mandel complaint as related to the allegations of abuse in the Mandel complaint. That's not what he testified to. Elaine, yeah, Leo, you and I, Mr. Preziato, I made my objection. If he can answer, he can answer. Elaine, well, we'll have to read that transcript later, but go ahead and make your objection, and maybe we can let Mr. Carino get on with this. Oh my God. So Mr. Darren said, I agree with the objection. I don't think you said anything about knowing about the Mandel lawsuit as it related to Ms. Heard. But if you knew anything about the coverage as it related to the lawsuit and as it related to Mr. Depp's personal reputation, feel free to answer it. Christian, yeah, Elaine, the only thing I was trying to say was I'm aware of the coverage of that lawsuit. That's all I was able to answer from what you're asking, I think. Elaine, and what was the coverage? Christian, I can't answer that specifically, but there was a fair amount of articles written about that lawsuit. Elaine, do you remember any of the topics? Christian, no. Elaine, can you say one way or the other, any of the coverage included accusations by Amber of Mr. Depp's committing abuse and domestic violence against Ms. Heard? Mr. Preziato, objection lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Christian, somebody's not. There's a lot of feedback, at least that I'm hearing, like scratching and moving and stuff. Elaine, yeah, I'm hearing it too. I'm not sure who it is. Christian, I'm not aware of the specific accusations in the Mandel lawsuit that's related to Amber's allegations. No. Elaine, one way or the other, you don't know whether there was or not, correct? Christian, you've told me that there were, but my only knowledge of that is that what you told me a few minutes ago. Elaine, well, and I'm just trying to make sure that we have clear. Sometimes when you say I'm not aware of, it can mean I know there wasn't any, or other times it can mean I don't know one way or the other. So all I was trying to do was clarify so we can clear the record. I take it, let me just ask it. Are you aware one way or the other the coverage on the Mandel lawsuit included accusations of DV of abuse by Mr. Depp against Ms. Heard? Christian, no. Elaine, now you're aware that the op-ed by Dan Wooten in The Sun included accusations by Amber of DV against Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, yep. Elaine, are you aware how much negatively that impacted Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation, those statements in the op-ed by Mr. Wooten? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware of how much the particulars of claim that Exhibit 11 that was filed by Mr. Depp against The Sun and Mr. Wooten impacted negatively on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation in light of the allegations of Ms. Heard's accusations against Mr. Depp of DV? Mr. Preziato, objection, compound, vague, and ambiguous. Christian, yeah, I don't understand that question. Elaine, yeah, I asked it badly, so I'll try that one again. Are you aware of how much the allegations of Amber Heard's accusations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp contained in the particulars of claims filed by Mr. Depp impacted Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation? And the fact that Christian was able to keep up with that, he said no. Elaine, one way or the other? Mr. Preziato, objection, assumes facts and not evidence, lacks foundation. Elaine, one way or the other? Christian, when you say one way or the other, what are you actually asking? Elaine, I thought I explained that a little bit earlier, and I obviously didn't do a good job of it. When someone says you are aware of, sometimes people say no, and they mean I know it didn't happen. Sometimes people can say, no, I'm just not, I don't know one way or the other. So to be more specific, to be clearer on the record, just to make it so you're not saying no there, I'm just saying, are you aware one way or the other? Christian, okay. Elaine, and that establishes you don't know one way or the other. Mr. Preziato, or Elaine, maybe not use the term aware in your question. It's vague and ambiguous term, and you've just indicated. Elaine, I don't agree with you on that one, Leo. There's a lot of different choices, but I don't think aware is one. Mr. Darren, let's not go back and redo those questions again. Elaine, yeah, either he knows or he doesn't. And aware is certainly an appropriate word for that one. Greg, right? We'd have to go back and redo a lot of those. Okay, so Paul, can you just read that back? Aware, you aware, one way or the other? Because I don't think Mr. Carino answered it, so I just want to get the answer to the question. Christian, I am not aware. Elaine, and then I asked, are you aware one way or the other? Just to clear it up? Christian, I guess I still don't understand when you say one way or the other. In this case, you're asking me. Elaine, I'm asking the difference between when you say I'm not aware, that could mean I know there wasn't, or when you say one way or the other, I don't know one way or the other, there was. It's just a clarifying question. Christian, I don't know one way or the other. Elaine, okay, thank you. Are you aware, one way or the other, how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the complaint that was filed in this case that contained Amber Heard's accusations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp? Christian, no. Elaine, almost done with this one. Are you aware, one way or the other, how much the allegations of Amber Heard's accusations of Mr. Depp's DV and abuse impacted Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation as a result of the UK decision? Christian, nope. Elaine, are you aware of how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted as a result of the op-ed in the Washington Post for Amber Heard? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware of how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the accusation included in the Waldman tweet on May 2020 of the op-ed? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware of any role of opportunity that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the op-ed by Dan Wootton in The Sun? Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware of any role, and when I say an opportunity, any kind of business opportunity that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the particular of claim Mr. Depp filed? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Elaine, are you aware of any role or business opportunities that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the op-ed by Amber Heard in the Washington Post? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer. Christian, I said no. Elaine, okay, thank you. Are you aware of any roles or business opportunities that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the Waldman tweet from May 2020 relating to Amber's op-ed? Christian, no. Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous, lacks foundation. Elaine, one way or the other than the two that you've testified to, I believe it was Grindelwald role and then the one for Houdini. Are you aware of any other roles or business opportunities that Mr. Depp has lost as a result of the UK decision on November 2nd, 2020? Mr. Darren, objection, misstates his testimony. Christian, no. Elaine, and because we have an interesting objection there, I have to go back and apologize for this. Was it your understanding as a result of the UK decision that Mr. Depp would ask to step down from his role as Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts 3? Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, Paul, can you reread the first half of Elaine's question? Christian, yes. Elaine, and what is your understanding that as a result of the UK decision that Mr. Depp lost the opportunity to star in and be an executive producer of the Houdini TV project? Christian, yes. Elaine, is there any other role or business opportunity that Mr. Depp has lost since you started representing him in October of 2016? And I'm saying, Mr. Preziato, objection, vague and ambiguous, lacks foundation. Ms. Bredehoff, excuse me, I wasn't finished. And when I say other, I'm saying other than the Fantastic Beasts 3 role and the Houdini opportunity. Mr. Preziato, same objections. Christian, I would say yes. Elaine, what? Christian, the Pirates, the next Pirates movie. Elaine, do you remember which one that was? Christian, 6, 7, I'm not sure the number is. Elaine, okay, it's 6. I think it's Pirate 6 is the one that's yet to come out. And why? What is your understanding of why Mr. Depp lost Pirate 6? Christian, my opinion is that it was related to the accusations that Ms. Heard made. Elaine, and what is your opinion based on? Christian, excuse me? Elaine, and what is your opinion based on? Christian, a conversation with colleagues and studio execs. Elaine, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Yeah, she didn't want to hear that. Christian, conversations with studios and other executives, both internal and external. Elaine, when you say related to the accusations that were made by Amber Heard against Mr. Depp, are you talking about the accusations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay, how many conversations have you had with the studio and other executives? Christian, I have no idea. Elaine, more than 5? More than 10? Christian, I don't know about more than 10, probably between 5 and 10. Elaine, who do you recall speaking with at studios or other executives? Christian, Jerry Bruckheimer, probably most Jerry, and then colleagues at CAA. Elaine, and when did you first have any conversations with Jerry Bruckheimer about Pirate 6 and Mr. Depp? Christian, I have no idea. Elaine, do you recall whether it was in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019? Christian, I don't. Elaine, and when did you have any conversation with colleagues at CAA? Christian, it would have been whenever the decisions were being made about how to cast that movie. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the year it was. Elaine, do you recall who you spoke with at CAA? Christian, I spoke with Jack Wigham and I spoke with Brian Lord. Elaine, do you recall Jerry Bruckheimer telling you? Christian, I don't recall the specific conversations, but the nature of it was that the studio was having difficulty employing him. Elaine, did Mr. Bruckheimer tell you why the studio was having difficulty employing Mr. Depp? Christian, no, not specifically, but it was understood. Elaine, did you ask? Christian, I didn't need to ask. Elaine, why did you think that you didn't need to? Christian, because everyone was aware of what was garnering the attention of the studios in determining whether or not he could be employed. Elaine, when you say everyone was aware, how do you know that? Christian, I don't know. I just knew. Elaine, can you tell me who everyone is? Can you tell me who everyone is? Christian, the people who would have been involved in making that decision. Elaine, and did any of them talk to you? Christian, what do you mean? Elaine, well, if it's my understanding you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only person at Disney that you spoke with about pirates and employing Mr. Depp was Jerry Bruckheimer, correct? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and you spoke between 5 to 10 times with Mr. Bruckheimer, and you did not say in any of those conversations, the reason we're not employing Mr. Depp is because of Amber Heard's accusations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp, correct? Christian, that's correct. Mr. Darren, objection, misstates his testimony. He said he has conversation with colleagues and studio execs a total of 5 and 10 times. I don't think he said he spoke to Mr. Bruckheimer a total of 5 to 10 times. Christian, Greg's right. Elaine, well, let's clear that up because I definitely misunderstood that. Did you speak with anyone other than Mr. Darren and Elaine, if I could? Elaine, excuse me, please don't interrupt my questions. Mr. Darren, no, I didn't want to interrupt you. I wanted to give you a warning that I had. Elaine, oh, Mr. Darren, it's 12:45. Elaine, yeah, I'm totally with you. Mr. Darren, so I don't want to interrupt you. Elaine, I will talk about Mr. Bruckheimer when we get back. We'll go ahead and we'll stop now until 1:30 your time, 4:30 my time, thank you. Mr. Darren, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't want to be rude. Elaine, not a problem, no, I totally respect your time. So they went off the record, and then they're back on the record. Elaine, Mr. Carino, when we went off for the break, we were talking about your discussion with Jerry Bruckheimer and other executives at CAA, respecting Mr. Depp not being employed further at Disney and likely not in Pirates. And I think a question came up right before the break, so I just want to make sure that I have it clear. Did you talk with anyone other than Jerry Bruckheimer at Disney about Mr. Depp not being employed again at Disney or Pirates? Christian, nope. Elaine, okay. And I was correct in understanding that you had somewhere between 5 to 10 conversations with Mr. Bruckheimer relating to this topic. Christian, probably less than that. I talk to Jerry regularly, but probably not that many on this topic. Elaine, okay. And was there anyone else at Disney that you spoke with at any point about Johnny Depp being considered for Pirates or not being employable by Disney? Christian, nope. Elaine, is that true to the present? Christian, yeah. Elaine, okay. And the other discussion that you had, those were all executives at CAA? Christian, yeah. Elaine, and that was Brian Lord and Jack Wingham, correct? Christian, yeah. Elaine, anyone else? Christian, not that I can recall, no. Elaine, okay. Now I just want to focus a little bit on this conversation with Jerry Bruckheimer. Did you initiate the discussion with Jerry Bruckheimer, or did Jerry Bruckheimer initiate the discussion with you to let you know that they were having difficulty being able to employ Mr. Depp again? Christian, I don't remember. Elaine, okay. You had indicated that you believe that everyone was aware that the impact of Amber's allegations were at the heart of this. I just want to make sure we're clear since we're just talking about this before the break. Jerry Bruckheimer did not say specifically what it was that caused Disney to decide not to continue with Johnny Depp for Pirates 6 or in any matters, correct? Christian, correct. Elaine, okay. Did either Mr. Lloyd or Jack Wingham say anything to you about whether it was Amber's allegations of domestic violence by Johnny Depp or something else that led to Disney not wanting to employ Johnny Depp in the next Pirates or in other matters? Christian, I don't recall whether anyone explicitly said it, but it was understood. Elaine, well, I'm trying to reach that it was understood. I'm trying to discover any facts that would have led you to believe that it was understood. If I'm understanding to use the same word, Mr. Bruckheimer didn't tell you that, correct? Christian, again, it was understood. So I don't recall whether either of us ever said anything specific of why, but it was something within the industry that it was understood. Elaine, and when you say within the industry, it is understood. What is in the industry that has led you to believe that it was understood that the reason Depp was not going to get the next Pirates or other work with Disney was because of Amber Heard's allegations of DV and abuse by Mr. Depp? Christian, The industry is in a state where Me Too allegations make it very difficult for any studio to employ anyone. Elaine, and what do you mean by that? Christian, I don't know. I don't know how it could be clearer. Elaine, when did the Me Too movement begin to impact Hollywood? Christian, from day one. Elaine, do you recall what year that was? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you recall whether it was before it started representing Mr. Depp in October 2016? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you recall whether it was in 2018? Christian, I don't know. You can look it up, or I can look it up if you want me to. If you want me to switch screens, but no, I don't. Elaine, can you tell me whether any other actors did not receive roles or were unemployable because of Me Too movement allegations other than Mr. Depp, I'm asking? Christian, not that I work with directly. Nope. Elaine, do you know in the industry of any others? Mr. Prezziato, objection, calls for expert opinion. Elaine, I'm sorry, you're on mute. Christian, I don't think I can give you names because I don't work with them directly, but it's easily accessible. You can just Google it. Elaine, in any of your discussions with Mr. Bruckheimer, did you ask him what Mr. Depp could to do become employable by Disney again, or just be able to get any part in Pirates franchise going forward? Christian, nope. Elaine, why not? Christian, because in a case like this, there is nothing anyone can do. It's the directive of the studio, and they have the sole right to make the judgment whether they continue to employ someone or not. Elaine, and your understanding from your discussion with Mr. Bruckheimer is that Disney had made the judgment to decide that they could no longer employ Mr. Depp. Is that correct? Christian, yes, but not solely based on the conversations with Mr. Bruckheimer. It was commutative with the internal and external conversations. Elaine, all right, what did Mr. Lord say that led you to believe that Disney had made the decision, the judgment, that they were not able to employ Mr. Depp at Disney? Christian, they just made that the decision had been made. Elaine, what did Mr. Wingham say about? Christian, the same. Elaine, Disney making the judgment or whether they would be able to employ Mr. Depp further. Christian, same thing. Elaine, okay, just that they had made the decision? Christian, correct. Elaine, did you know whether Mr. Lloyd or Mr. Wingham also spoke with Jerry Bruckheimer? Christian, I did not know. Elaine, did you know whether Mr. Lloyd or Mr. Wingham spoke with anyone else? Christian, I don't know. I'm sure they did, but I don't know. Elaine, okay, were you aware of any issues in Pirates 5, Pirates of the Caribbean, the fifth one, with Mr. Depp? Mr. Darren, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, yeah, I'm not sure. Mr. Presidito joined in. Elaine, were you aware of any problems on the set with Mr. Depp during the filming of Pirates 5? Oh, like maybe your client chopped his finger off? Is that what you're talking about, Elaine? Okay, let's talk about that. Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Christian, yeah. Elaine, what you're trying to get at, I'm not sure. Elaine, were you aware of Mr. Depp engaging in alcohol and drug use, maybe tardy, any of those issues during the filming of Pirates 5? Christian, I'm aware of him being tardy, but he's been tardy on everything his entire life. Elaine, are you aware of whether that was troublesome to Disney during the filming of Pirates 5? Christian, I think it's troublesome to everybody, but everyone has learned how to produce a film to deal with it. Elaine, working around Mr. Depp? Christian, yeah, when you're Depp, people work around you, I guess. Christian, Elaine, do you know whether there was anyone on the set of Pirates 5 who wasn't willing to deal with it and was quite irritated by it? Christian, nope. Elaine, okay, were you aware of any drug use and alcohol use issues that Johnny Depp had during the filming of Pirates 5? Christian, nope. Elaine, were you aware that the filming had to be shut down for a period of time after Mr. Depp injured his finger? Christian, haha, yep. Elaine, do you know how much time was lost in the filming of Pirates 5 as a result of Mr. Depp having to leave because of the injury to his finger? Well, Elaine, your client caused that, so you might want to, pipe it down on that. Christian, I don't. Elaine, do you have any personal knowledge of how Mr. Depp injured his finger? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous as to personal knowledge. You mean he personally witnessed it? Elaine, do you know what I mean by personal knowledge? Christian, nope. Elaine, did you see or witness the injury to Mr. Depp's finger? Christian, nope. Elaine, did Mr. Depp ever tell you how his finger was injured? Christian, nope. Elaine, did Amber Heard ever tell you how Mr. Depp injured his finger? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you know how much it cost Disney for the delaying in filming as a result of Mr. Depp injuring his finger and having to leave and have surgery? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you know whether there was any disagreements between Mr. Depp and Mr. I think it's Bailey during Pirates 5? Christian, nope. Elaine, do you know whether there was a disagreement between Disney and Mr. Depp with respect to artistic issues in Pirates 5? Mr. Darren, object, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Prezzato, same. Christian, what do you want to know, Elaine? Exactly. Like, what are you looking for? Elaine, were you aware of any disagreements between Mr. Depp and Disney, including Mr. Bailey and others who were on the project about artistic difference? In other words, where Mr. Depp thought something should be this way or something should be that way and they didn't agree? Christian, yeah. Elaine, what is your understanding of that? Christian, there was a difference of opinion on how the film was edited. Elaine, and that's your understanding of what Mr. Depp thought it should be edited to? Christian, I don't know how to describe the difference between the Disney edit and Johnny's preferred edit. Elaine, how did you learn about? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Christian, I think Johnny told me about it, talked about it a little bit. Elaine, do you know how well Pirates 5 did at the box office? Christian, not exactly. Elaine, do you know whether it was more successful or less successful than the earlier Pirates franchises? Christian, I think it was slightly less than. It wasn't the most successful installment of that franchise. Elaine, do you know whether Mr. Depp has a pay or play clause that would pay him even if he was not in the subsequent Pirates 6? Christian, in 6? Elaine, yeah. Christian, I don't think he does. Elaine, are you aware that Mr. Depp has said that if Disney came to him with 300 million and a million alpacas, nothing under this earth, on this earth, would get me to come back to work with Disney on Pirates of the Caribbean film? Mr. Prezziato, objection. Lex Foundation assumes facts not on evidence, calls for speculation. Christian, was your question, am I aware that he said that? Is that what your question was? Elaine, yes. Christian, no. Elaine, are you aware that he's testified under oath, quote, I can tell you that God's honest truth right now, based on everything, if they came to me with 300 million and a million alpacas, nothing under this earth, on this earth, would get me to go back and work with Disney on a Pirates Caribbean film, end quote. Are you aware of that? Mr. Prezziato, objection. Lex Foundation assumes facts not on evidence, calls for speculation based on his previous testimony. Christian, Elaine, you got cut off at the very end, so I didn't hear the last part of what you said. Elaine, were you aware that Mr. Depp testified to exactly those words? Christian, nope. Mr. Prezziato, say an objection. Elaine, have you or anyone at CAA on behalf of Mr. Depp made any efforts with Disney to find any roles for Mr. Depp since he filmed Pirates 5? Mr. Prezziato, objection, vague and ambiguous. Mr. Darren, Paul, I may hear that back, please? Mr. Darren, thank you. Mr. Prezziato, same objection. Christian, my efforts were probably primarily around Houdini, which at one point was a film, but other people at CAA for sure did, yes. Elaine, and who were they? Christian, I would start with Jack Wingham. Mr. Prezziato, Elaine, if I can interrupt here, based on my timing, your time is up with respect to this deposition. I think it's been 3.5 hours on the record of your questioning. Elaine, no, not correct. I'm entitled to have 7 hours of deposition. You can't. Mr. Prezziato, that's not true. Elaine, cut it in half. Mr. Prezziato, that's not true. Elaine, that is true. Mr. Prezziato, actually pursuant to CPP section a third-party witness is only required to sit for 7 hours total. Elaine, right. Mr. Prezziato, because we cross-designated, we're entitled to as much time as you are. So half of 7 hours is 3.5 hours, and you've completed 3.5 hours on the record. So now it's our turn. Elaine, I don't agree to that, and I'm not going to. Mr. Prezziato, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. That's the law, Elaine. So it's my turn to start asking questions now. Elaine, I do not agree with that, and I'm not going to stop asking questions. I'm entitled to my 7 hours. I don't intend to take 7 hours. You don't get to split with me because you do a cross designation. Mr. Prezziato, well, we need to meet and confer on this. Would you like to take a look at the statute that says that? Elaine, the statute says that what? What? Mr. Prezziato, you agree that this is a California subpoena that Mr. Carino's? Elaine, no. Mr. Prezziato, appearing under? Elaine, no, it's Virginia subpoena. Mr. Prezziato, and we're operating. And they just keep going back and forth. And so, Mr. Prezziato, we're operating under California law. Elaine, we're just talking over each other. I'm just going to continue on. You can preserve your objection, but I fully intend to continue this deposition. Mr. Prezziato, well, Elaine, you can do that. It's not permitted under the code. You're eating into my time. You're eating into our time now. Mr. Darren, hang on for a second. Mr. Carino, are you going to disappear for the next 5 minutes? The two of you can talk. All I can tell you is that Mr. Carino is not going to come back for another day deposition, and you guys can argue. Mr. Preziato, and that's exactly my point. Mr. Darren, okay. Mr. Preziato, and that's exactly my point. He's not required to. Mr. Darren, well, you guys can work it out, and we're going to go off for a couple of minutes so Mr. Carino doesn't have to listen to this. Elaine, that's fair. Okay. So they went off the record, and then they went back on the record. So this one's almost done. Mr. Preziato, this is Leo Preziato back on the record. The parties have a dispute with respect to the amount of time that Ms. Bredehoff had with the witness. Plaintiff's contention is that because of the rule that provides only 7 hours for third-party witnesses, that she is entitled to 3.5 hours, and that's concluded, and now we're entitled to our 3.5 hours. Not only is that set forth in the code, but it's also the agreement of the parties as indicated in previous transcripts. And it was also confirmed by fairly recent email from Mr. Moniz in my office. We were trying to schedule an IDC, informal discovery conference with Judge Bowick. Her clerk has indicated that she's most likely available at 3 o'clock. It's now 2:24. So the parties have decided, Mr. Darren, counsel for the witness, has agreed that we'll conclude this deposition for today, subject to the judge's ruling on our dispute, and then Mr. Carino will reappear for the remaining 3.5 hours of his deposition, and we'll have an understanding of who will be deposing Mr. Carino during those 3.5 hours. So with that said, unless Elaine, you have any comments, and of course Elaine has a comment, doesn't she? Yes, I absolutely do. First of all, what Mr. Presidito said before, and I believe this was actually on the record, he claimed this was actually on the record. He claimed that because they had cross notice, they had the right to 3.5 hours. We're not even able to locate it. We just found out that the cross notice was filed 6 days ago, which would not have given us remotely reasonable time to suddenly know that we're cut in half, or at least significantly cut in half, even if it was the rule. I've checked the California Council and they said it's not in 2025, which is what was cited. And in fact, we've asked if there was a specific rule or specific subsection or anything that they said that they can cut in half, that they were able to list that. They said they were relying on an agreement that was made with a former counsel that clearly has not been in the case for almost a year. Well, since June of 2020, it's never been repeated to us. The email was making the reference of saying that there was some kind of an agreement, doesn't say anything close to being able to put us on notice that there was some kind of agreement on it. And I think I was absolutely deceived, and a game was played here today to wait until 3.5 hours to say, oh, your time is up. At an absolute minimum, there should have been a courtesy to have a discussion about this, to have an agreement. If it was even something, I'm not saying that Mr. Carino has to be more than 7 hours, but the fact that there wasn't even any effort with 4 lawyers on this phone representing Mr. Depp, not one effort in all of those weeks, they were trying to schedule this for them to say, oh, and by the way, we get 3.5 hours, nothing, zero, zip. I think it was deceptive, and I'm very, very troubled by the manner in which I was handled. Mr. Darren, I apologize to you because I'm not familiar with this rule. I did call our counsel, the lead partner in California, who said he's taken thousands of depositions and never heard of such a rule or an agreement or policy. And I apologize because Mr. Carino should have been able to be finished today, and I would have been happy to work with the other side for a reasonable accommodation of that. But obviously did not have any notice whatsoever of that until they say, oh, by the way, your 3.5 is up. And I think that's just outrageous tactics, so I'm sorry. Mr. Preziato, and I just want to address the deception part. There's no deception here, Elaine. I work under the presumption that counsel knows the rules. I work under the presumption that counsel knows the agreements reached between the parties even prior to them becoming counsel. You heard me ask for the timing of you on the record through the entire deposition. I assume you knew that because I was calculating up 3.5 hours. Like you said, I assumed you knew the law. So to say that I was being deceptive, okay, so he goes on. So to say there's deception is untrue, insulting, and unprofessional. And also know that to the extent we're in front of Judge Bowick today, you're not licensed to practice in California. So I'm warning you to have California counsel present for that. And you will not be entitled to argue at that hearing unless you intend to practice without a license in California. Now, that being said, we can go off the record. And thank you, Mr. Darren, for accommodating us. Elaine, and please apologize to Mr. Carino for this. I think it's outrageous that we have to reconvene. Mr. Darren, I appreciate that everyone's courtesy and cooperation with Mr. Carino. Tomorrow, I suspect that nobody believes they're going to go 7 hours with Mr. Wingham, But in the event that however long you intend to go with Mr. Wingham, whatever the court's disposition is today, I assume it will apply tomorrow with regard to Mr. Wingham. But to the extent that you have any belief that it may not, I had appreciated if you worked out whatever your accommodation is going to be as respect to Mr. Wingham. So, Mr. Darren, we have the same ground rules tomorrow as well. Thank you all. Assuming that we're not miraculously somehow going to reconvene this afternoon, I'll wait to hear from you, or we'll talk tomorrow about trying to find a date to reconvene with Mr. Carino. So again, thank you for your courtesy today, and good luck this afternoon. Woo-wee! Oh man, and that was the end of that. That's it. That's all she wrote. So I will continue on with part 2. I believe it was like a year later that they got back to Christian Carino. Elaine asked horrible questions. She wasted her 3.5 on horrible fucking questions. The woman is insufferable. I don't know how anyone handles her. Anyway, oh my God, I don't know how Christian didn't just... How could you just get up and walk away from the table at that point? Anyway, that's it. That's all. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Just know I appreciate every single one of you. I love every single one of you. Have a great day.